Sup folks, welcome to the part 14, of What If Deku Run an Orphanage, chapter 85, YHMMMMM. Yami was pouting. Honesty, it was one of the cutest things Izuku had seen in a little bit, however, it was his job to put a stop to it. It's fine Yami, Izuku reassured him from behind his desk, giving him a kind smile. She got past all the grim, Yami said, still pouting. And she beat a lot of them so easily. And she is an extremely powerful fighter. Someone who passed the extremely rigorous test to get a bodyguard license. Something even pro heroes admit is difficult. Izuku told him. To be able to almost defeat her, at your age, is extremely impressive. Yami's pout lessened. He'd seen the Seer's recording of the woman fighting the Grimm. He had to admit, she was something beyond almost anything he'd seen before. Yami knew that he wasn't the strongest person in the world. Heck, he wasn't even the strongest person here. If he threw all his Grimm at Sanson at once, he doubted anything would stop her. Except maybe the Hound, but he still doubted that would work. And of course, heroes like All Might and the American hero Star and Stripe were far beyond his level of strength, or really any level of strength he could hope to achieve. The amount of negativity he would need in order to make something that could fight against people like them. Well, honestly, Yami hoped that amount of negativity ever came into existence. However, in all honesty, he wasn't too upset about his Grimm not being able to stop her. Something he learned via observation is that all quirks have shortcomings. Sanson was a great example of that because Sanson could either be unbeatable or a complete pushover. The Slime Girl was widely considered to be the strongest person in the house. Able to take on other contenders like Kiba, Fu, Shraku, and hordes of his Grimm without any issue, but against she is utterly helpless. Had one of those quirks that was most effective if you didn't know how it worked. As if you did know, then it would be pretty easy to take her down by just not looking at her eyes. And couldn't really fight either, meaning that at this point most of the children in the house could beat in her a fight. Sanson was the exception because her entire body acted as her eyes. And while this is more useful than it is detrimental, it also meant that fighting was pretty much impossible. And wasn't her only issue. Her spars against Nara in her Artiguana form always ended in less than 2 minutes, and always in Sanson's defeat. And she wasn't even allowed to fight Netsu, as Netsu could very easily accidentally kill her. All quirks had their strength and their weaknesses. Even if Sori had wanted to kill them, they were never in any danger, because she'd never beat Sanson. And his family would be safe. Of course, Izuku was displeased with having to use his siblings to fend off attackers, which is why Yami would work hard to make new Grimm, which would strengthen their security system even further. And for that, he would need a lot more negativity. He'd used a lot to create the security system, and now he needed a lot to fix it. So for that, he would need to visit the city again. But now he didn't plan on just wandering the city like last time. No. He had a plan. Yami finally stopped pouting, and his expression turned back to his typical, neutral expression. Dad. I'm going to the city tomorrow, right? Only if you want to. Izuku really wanted to replenish his security system, but he still didn't want to force things onto his son. I do. Yami nodded. I want to go with Mai, I figured that was the case. She is a rather good friend of yours. Izuku smiled. He was very pleased that one of his children had made a friend outside the house, and would do everything in his power to allow Mai to interact more with his children. Show them the world wasn't so cruel. I already called her parents, and they said she'd be delighted to go with you tomorrow. Yami nodded. Who's Champa chaperoning us? Well, you'll get to. Mine is going with you, and you'll also be driven around by Mr. Yagi. Do you remember him? He was the one who came here to supervise you all while we were at UA. You met him briefly. Izuku reminded him. Yami nodded, and briefly was an understatement. As one of the kids who went to UA, he'd only met Mr. Yagi for a few minutes. When he came to the house. And when he left. The only reason he really remembers him is because he looked more like an undead than Fu did, and that boy was an actual zombie. He doubted he'd be able to protect them much, but that is most likely what Mino was there for. Yami looked at the door. If everything went as planned, then they should be coming soon. A few seconds later, the person he'd been waiting for, Kyaku, barged into the room. "Daddy, we need to talk." "Kyaku, I told you to knock." Izuku lightly scolded. "Sorry, Daddy." Kyaku quickly apologized, before returning to looking worried and upset. "We need to talk about the new employee." Izuku sighed. He knew this would come up. He already had a talk with his mother and Okako about his decision to hire Sori. And he knew that he'd be having a similar discussion with Sori. "I told myself that I wouldn't be upset about hiring outsiders, but really, Daddy. She attacked the house." Kyaku protested. "How can we trust someone like her to keep us safe when she attacked us?" Izuku sighed. "I told you, she wasn't attacking us. There was a misunderstanding. She never meant to do me, or anyone here, any harm. And I've looked very thoroughly into her background. Believe me, she is of no harm to us. She even consented to a psychic probing. Which, if you don't know, is allowing someone to look through your mind for thoughts or memories that indicate you'd be a threat to your employer, which is us. It's something not a lot of people are comfortable with doing, and consenting to it in and of itself shows how innocent she is. We literally looked through her brain and found no proof that she wanted to hurt us. I know it's hard, I don't trust outsiders either, but it's what needs to be done." Kyaku didn't really have any argument against that. "I mean, how could you really say she might be dangerous when you literally looked through their mind?" Still, she didn't like this decision one bit. That woman had caused her so much stress when she heard about an intruder coming to kill her father, and taking down their Grim, and now she was just supposed to forgive her? Forgiveness wasn't exactly Kyaku's specialty. Izuku knew this, and so he already had a plan to comfort her. He walked over to her, and picked her up, bringing her back to his desk and sitting down, before placing her on his lap and embracing her. "Kyaku, what do you think a father's #1 priority should be?" "Giving out love and hugs," Kyaku answered, snuggling into Izuku's chest. "Close. The #1 priority of a father is to make sure his family is safe," Izuku told her. "And yet, I sent my daughter to fight a potential assassin. In pretty every situation, that is unacceptable. The only reason I even considered it is because I looked at her fighting all the Grim, and figured she didn't have any way of actually hurting Sanson. And I was right. But in the very slim chance I was wrong about that, then I would have sent my daughter directly into harm's way. And thought makes me feel ill." Izuku tightened his grip on the chair. Anger and shame directed at himself coursed through him. Honestly, even if he was right in the end and Sanson would have been fine, he still regretted sending her out there at all. Back then he had considered going out there to face Soria himself if she got past all the Grim. Hoping at the very least if she killed him, she would spare his family and 1A. Ultimately, he didn't because of a few reasons. Firstly, he was pretty certain that if he tried that, at least Okako, if not many more members of 1A would have stopped and restrained him, gone out to fight her themselves, and died because they were nowhere near her level. Secondly, he was almost 100% sure that Sanson could easily defeat this woman, without any harm coming towards the slime girl. And third, if he died, then chances are this whole operation would fall apart. He had no doubt that DOC would try to salvage this with a replacement, or that his mother would try and fulfill his role, but given how unstable this situation was already, he doubted the Midoriya Foundation could survive his death right now, not to mention all the psychological trauma that would inflict on his children. And so he was backed into a corner and forced to send out his less than 10-year-old daughter to fight for him. Never again. For all the panic Sori had caused him, she also did him a great favor in showing him how his defense system did against A or S rank villains. And the answer was, not so great. Sure, It was extremely unlikely he would ever have to deal with A or S rank villains, considering that A rank villains made up 8% of all villains and S ranks made up less than 1%, but it wasn't impossible. And so Izuku would have to increase his security to handle such villains, or at least stall them long enough for the heroes to show up. "Kyaku, you don't want villains to come in and hurt any of us, right?" Izuku asked her. Kyaku shook her head so hard Izuku was concerned she'd hurt her neck. "Then I need to make sure that our security can handle threats on the level of Sori," Izuku told her. "Which it can't. But you know who can handle threats on the level of Sori?" "Sori." Kyaku begrudgingly, looking like she just swallowed expired milk. "That's right. It's very rare to find someone with her talents, and that someone literally knocked down our front door and asked for a job," Izuku explained. "Not to mention I was able to do a background check so thorough that it leaves me with no doubts about her allegiance. This is a golden, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, falling on my lap. I would be a fool not to take it." HMMMM. Kyaku was now the one pouting, as she no longer had any argument outside of she didn't like her, which she knew was a weak argument in the face of Izuku's much stronger ones. She knew Izuku knew much more than her, and he made decisions that she didn't like a lot of the time, but ultimately they proved to be necessary. But sometimes, she felt that Izuku's kind heart could be too kind. She didn't see any issue with her siblings fighting villains. The villains who got all the way here would no doubt be tired after fighting the Grimm, and her siblings were extremely powerful. They would be more than capable of handling threats coming their way. But Izuku loved them too much to put them in any kind of danger, and as such, they would need a powerful bodyguard. And Kyaku hated to admit, she did like the idea of having someone so powerful guarding her father's life when they weren't around him. Although she would have preferred that person to be Okuko. But Okuko had a life of her own and didn't live here. Nor would she, unless. As a plot brewed in Kyaku's mind, Yami started his own. "Hey Dad, I want Kyaku to come outside with us," Yami suggested. "Eh?" Kyaku's head spun to look at Yami, giving him a shocked and betrayed look. "That's..." Izuku also looked surprised, but he was considering it. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Father." Yonda's voice rang inside their heads, and they looked at the doorway to see that the mind reader had let herself in. "Kyaku's always so scared and upset about the outside world, I'm worried she'll end up like Fukinoko and shut herself away. Oh, the thought brings me to tears." Yonda whipped a fake tear away from her eye and secretly winked at Yami. Yami smirked, as Yonda did her part of the plan. "A few hours earlier you want me to convince Dad to force Kyaku to go outside with you, and you want me to come to, and tell you what she's thinking." Yonda reiterated what Yami had asked of her, right? Yami nodded. Yonda gave him an odd look. The boy had come to her room with such a big request, that she didn't see the direct benefit in. "Why? Want to know why she hates outside so much?" Yami explained. "Getting her outside is hard. Need help. Also need to know her thoughts. To help figure out why she was so angry. And help her. Most of the children in the house were pretty happy nowadays. Izuku's fall aside, they were all pretty willing to push aside the negatives of their past and to some extent their present, to enjoy the many positives they had now. However, there were a few exceptions to this. Those being Kyaku, Kota, Fukinoko, Ken and Fu. Fuka was trying to be more positive and she had plenty of people around her to help her with that. He would get to Kota, Ken, and Fu at different times, but for now, he wanted to try and help Kyaku. For two reasons mainly. Firstly is that she is the most upset at any given point in time, out of all of his siblings. Bringing up anything about the world outside would either cause her to get slightly upset, or really upset. And from what Yami could tell, that was not healthy. And the second reason was, well, he owed her. It was thanks to her that Yami was who he was today. Without her, It would have taken years for Yami to adjust to civilization, and so many things either would have been pushed back or never happened in the first place, like his friendship with Amai. Not to mention she saved both him and Izuku years of hard work in trying to get him to adjust. Much like Izuku, he owed her a debt he could never really pay off. But he intended to try. Not to mention it would likely help him in his journey to become a therapist, so it was mutually beneficial anyway. I see. Yonda considered it. She wasn't really sure if this would help out Kyaku, but she was interested in that happening. Kyaku's negativity was something she could do without, but still, that was a lot of work for something that ultimately might be pointless. I'll do it for 10,000 yen. Deal. Yami already had the money in his pocket and threw it on Yonda's bed. He'd been taught that money was a useful tool, and from what he'd seen, that was very true. Yonda grabbed the money, smiling as she counted it. You'll have my full support, dearest brother. Back to the present. Izuku gave this some serious thought. Daddy. Kyaku objected, giving Izuku a tearful look. I don't want to go. Izuku gave her a sad look. All in all, that only convinced him he needed to send her more. It was one thing to prefer staying inside, but it was another to loathe the outside world entirely. Still, he didn't just want to force her. He needed to convince her. Kyaku, I think that going outside might do you some good. You can see that people aren't all trying to hurt you. Izuku told her. But, since I know you really don't want to, I won't force you. Kyaku breathed a sigh of relief. However, Izuku added, if you go outside, not only will I give you 15,000 as part of your allowance, I'll also let you pick what we have for dessert tonight. Kyaku looked conflicted. Izuku gave her this choice for a reason. If she really hated the idea of going outside, so much that she would refuse an offer like that, then forcing her outside really would not be the right call. Meanwhile, Kyaku was really struggling to make a call here. The offer was good, and on top of all that, going would make Izuku very pleased with her. Fine. Kyaku relented, not looking particularly happy about her decision. Good. Thank you for giving this a try. Izuku patted her on the head, and kissed her forehead, already making her feel better about her decision. You've made me proud. Kyaku smiled a bit, hugging her father. Thank you, Daddy. Well then. Izuku said Kyaku down. You should go get ready for tomorrow, it's gonna be a big day. Okay. Kyaku said, before turning around and leaving. Grabbing Yonda and Yami as she forced them out of the room with her. She closed the door behind her and then glared at her siblings in the hall outside. What are you two up to? I'm just worried for you, dear sister. Yonda lied. Both Kiba and dear Fuhai have described the hermit lifestyle as dreadful, and I just don't want that to be your fate. Kyaku gave her a suspicious look, not sure if she would buy that, but she would accept that answer for now. She then turned her attention to Yami. And you? Why do you want to drag me outside so much? Same reason. Yami also lied. Kyaku looked at him with even more suspicion than Yonda. However, unfortunately for her, she was against people who were particularly good at lying. Yonda pretty much had to be good at keeping secrets, seeing as if she didn't then there would be absolute chaos. And Yami was just not very expressive when he wasn't angry. Seeing as she couldn't detect any ulterior motives, Kyaku decided to drop it for now. Alright, I'll believe you for now. But don't expect me to have a good time tomorrow, I'll be busy watching for threats. I'm fairly certain Mina has that covered, dear sister. Yonda told her. HMPH. Better safe than sorry. Kyaku argued, before walking away. I'll see you both tomorrow. We live in the same house, you'll probably see us later today. Yonda pointed out. Kyaku ignored her and walked away. Are you really sure about this? Okako asked once again, standing opposite side to Izuku's desk and looking at him, face to face. You all kept telling me I needed to start trusting people and hiring people to help out, Izuku told her. Yeah, but I didn't mean to hire Just anyone, Okuko argued. You and I both know she's not just anyone. Izuku countered. Someone with that level of power and skill would take years if it was even possible at all. And not to mention she's not even in it for the money. She's genuinely loyal to Kiba and by extension me. Bad first impressions aside, she's literally perfect. Except for the part where she's dumb as a rock, Okuko pointed out with a sigh. Yes, she is rather lacking in intelligence. But, with enough direction, we easily work around that. Izuku told her. I've heard of pro heroes and sidekicks who are mentally lacking who have worked around it. Yeah, like All Might. Okuko thought bitterly. Ultimately, I need someone capable of handling threats that a normal security system can't. And she can do that, Izuku restated. Okuko crossed her arms. She knew trying to talk him out of this was pointless. Because while he called Sori's break-in a bad first impression, it was actually the best impression she could have made. Because she accomplished 3 things that pretty much guaranteed her the job. She made herself look strong, she made Izuku's security system look insufficient, and she made Izuku paranoid and desperate to strengthen his defenses. Had she met Sori on better terms, she would have no issue with her being hired. But given that she had been quaking in fear of this woman not even a week ago, it made her a little hesitant to leave her around Izuku and the kids. But, she heavily doubted that anyone would convince Izuku otherwise, and she didn't feel that strongly against having her hear that she would keep trying. Well, then shouldn't you wait until she starts working here for you to send the kids out into the city? Okuko asked. All Might will be with them, I know they'll be fine, Izuku reassured her. And I'm sending Mina there for good measure. I haven't known her long, but I don't think she'd ever let anything bad happen to the kids. I guess. Sorry, I'm just a little on edge. Okuko sighed. First you got sick, then the assassination attempts, and then Sori. It's just all been so. I know. It's a lot. Izuku gave her a sad smile. But we're still alive, still going strong despite everything. Yeah. Okuko smiled back. No one's knocking us down anytime soon. And Sori will help make sure of that, Izuku told her. Just trust me, alright, so this chapter was mostly just set up for the next chapter, and a bit more justification on why Izuku hired her after what she did. Author's notes, the next part of the story will be focusing on Kyaku. Because honestly, it's about time I gave her some focus. Kyaku has often been picked as the most unlikable of the children, and that's not really surprising. When you have this many kids, there are gonna be at least a couple brats. Kyaku is one of them. She's not really written to be extremely likable, and now we're going to explore a bit more about why she acts the way she does. As well as giving Yonda some more spotlight as well, which she also needs a lot. Yami doesn't really need much more attention right now, but he's gonna get a lot more because his quirk and his interests allow me to find organic ways to explore the minds of other characters. Chapter 86. Author's note, I shorten it a bit but it is basically an original book. If you are interested, it's called My Monster Family, The Hidden World. It takes a lot of inspiration from this very story, and if you read this story then you're gonna notice some familiar characters, but with a few differences. Again, if you're interested, it's on Archive of Our Own. I just released it not too long ago. And feedback would be very appreciated. End of author's notes. Alright, are you all ready to go? Izuku was standing outside the gates of the house, where him, All Might in skinny form, Mina, Yonda, Yami, Amei, and Kyaku. With All Might's car, the Hercules parked right next to them. They each had little book bags, filled with snacks and other supplies they may need, as well as first aid kits because Izuku was just that paranoid. Speaking of Izuku's paranoia, they also all had several tracking devices on them. Meaning that Izuku would know where they were at all times. Yes, Daddy. Kyaku nodded. I'm prepared, Father. Yonda said. I'm ready, Mr. Midoriya. Amei answered with a bright smile. Yami nodded. "Yonda, you have your hearing dampers?" Izuku asked her. "Of course, father." Yonda tilted her head to the side, so that way Izuku could see the devices in her ears. Yonda's hearing dampers acted kind of like reverse hearing aids, or earmuffs. They limited the range in which Yonda could hear people's thoughts. It helped keep Yonda from going insane in large crowds of people. "We'll take great care of them, sir," Mina said playfully, giving him a thumbs up. "None of them will come in harm's way, you have my word." "All might, or rather," Yagi said. "I'm trusting the two of you, please, don't disappoint me," Izuku begged them. "Don't worry, it's bad for your health," Mina told him, putting an arm on his shoulder and causing him to flinch. "I'll protect these kids with my life." Izuku gave her a small smile. From what he knew of Mina, he could tell she meant that. "Thank you." "All right, come on kids, we have much to see," Yagi said as he got into the driver's seat. Mina went into the passenger seat, and all the kids started climbing into the car. Kyoko was the last to go in, looking extremely hesitant. Izuku went over, and put a hand on her shoulder, and gave her a reassuring smile. "Hey, don't be scared. It's only for a few hours. At the end of the day, you'll be coming right back home. To your family." Kyoko gave a small, tenuous smile, before turning back towards the car, and hoping in. "Bye, Daddy. I'll see you when I get back." Izuku waved goodbye as the doors closed, and the car took off. Despite the supposed purpose of this trip being so that Yami could replenish his negativity reserves, they didn't really plan on going anywhere full of negativity. It was more a day trip than a supply run, if you could call negative emotions supplies. Because Yami could likely replenish his supplies enough by just being around people. And so their first stop was to get some breakfast. And of course, seeing as the person who was driving them was All Might, you could guess that they were in for some good old-fashioned American breakfast, at an American-style diner. "So this is an American-style restaurant," Amei said, looking around as all of them sat in a booth, with menus already on the table. "It's really cozy. It does have a very warm feeling to it," Yonda said as she looked through the menus. "By the way, who's paying?" "That would be me," Yagi said, with a smile. "I have quite a good amount of money stashed away, so feel free to indulge to your heart's desires." Yonda and Yami looked at each other for a second, before looking back at the menu intensely. "You know, I wonder what it'd be like, living in America," Amei said absent-mindedly as she looked over the food options. "Yeah, imagine how different you'd be, growing up in a whole different county," Mina added. "I don't imagine any of you would be too different," Yagi said, before sparing a glance over to the Midoriya children. "Well, actually, you three would likely be very different because there is no Midoriya Foundation in America. But that aside, I doubt growing up in America would turn you into a completely different person." "It sounds like you've been to America, Mr. Yagi," Amei pointed out. "I have. I studied abroad there for quite some time," Yagi explained. "It was a very educational experience. And I quite enjoyed my time there." "Interesting. What was it like?" Yonda asked, sounding slightly curious. "Well, it's a very different place. It's big. Much bigger than Japan, and every different state has a different culture, and different way of doing things," Yagi explained. "It can almost feel like each state is a different country at times. But all of them are bound by the same American spirit. But regardless of how different they seem on the outside, we're all still the same on the inside. And even though I was born and raised in Japan, a year into my studies, no one could tell the difference between myself and them. Yep. People are all the same," Kyoko thought. "Except for Dad. And Okuko. And my siblings. But the rest of them are the same." It was at this time the waitress came. "Good morning everyone, do you have your orders ready?" "One of everything," Yami said almost immediately. "Huh?" Everyone gave Yami a look of pure shock, including the waitress, who almost dropped her notepad. "One of everything," Yami repeated, his expression nor tone changing, as he waved his hand over the entire menu. Young Yami, I know I said you could have whatever you wanted, but it's not good to waste food, Yagi told him. Not waste. Eating it all. Yami said. One of everything. Surely, you can't possibly eat one of everything on this menu. There is quite a large amount of food items here. Yagi pointed out, holding up the menu, to exemplify his point. One of everything. Yami repeated. Not backing down. The two stared at each other for a few seconds, before Yagi caved. Well, I suppose we can't just pack up whatever leftovers remain. One of everything for him then. A one of everything thing for him then. The waitress said, getting over her shock and writing that down, before looking back up at everyone. And the rest of you? I would like the gold dust, strawberry, and cinnamon pancakes, please. Yonda said, causing the waitress to jump as suddenly hearing a voice in her head. My apologies, young Yonda here can only speak using her quirk. Yagi quickly explained. It's not something she can help. I see. Once again the waitress quickly got over her shock and wrote down the order. So that's one gold, dust strawberry and cinnamon pancakes. Sir. You are aware that this is going to be very expensive. Like, very very expensive, right? Trust me, I have more than enough money to pay for this. All Might chuckled. Although I will perhaps need to bring it up to their father that when I offered to pay, they decided to make their orders as expensive as possible. You're the one who said order our, here's desires. It's not my fault I like nice things. Yonda defended herself, crossing her arms and giving a cute pout. Yeah, come on Mr. Yagi, you can't say something like that, and then get upset when they pull something like this, Mina added, playfully nudging him with her elbow. I'm only kidding. Yagi laughed. It just took me a bit off guard is all. You're telling me these kids are merciless? The waitress thought, and Yonda gave her a partially offended look, that the waitress didn't catch. I'd like some eggs and bacon please. Mina asked. Alright, and eggs and bacon, and how would you like the eggs? The waitress asked. Sunny side up. Mina answered. Alright, and anything for the other two kids? The waitress asked. Yonda ordered gold dust strawberry pancakes. What are those? May I asked. It's a stack of 3 pancakes, covered in a strawberry cinnamon syrup, and then sprinkled with bits of gold. The waitress explained. And the only people who waste money on it, are people who never had to work for anything in their life. Yonda tried not to glare at the woman for that thought. What does gold taste like? May wondered, with a look of awe on her face. Who knows? Why don't you find out? Yonda asked, wanting her to order it just to spite the waitress. Is that really okay, Mr. Yagi? May didn't know how much that cost, but she would guess that anything with gold on it would be very expensive. It's fine. This may be the only time you get to experience this, so take the opportunity while you can. Yagi advised her. Okay. I'd like gold dust strawberry, pancakes, eggs sunny side up with bacon, hash browns, and French toast, May ordered. Where are you gonna put that? Thought everyone as they looked at May in shock. Except for Yami who was unfazed. I see, another order of gold dust strawberry pancakes, another order of sunny side up eggs and bacon, an order of hash browns, and an order of French toast. The waitress wrote all of it down. Alright, anything for the other little lady? Chocolate chip pancakes. Kyoko ordered. And that's all? The waitress was honestly more surprised she didn't order something crazy. Yes. Kyoko answered curtly. Alright, one order of chocolate chip pancakes. The waitress jotted that down. And lastly anything for your grandfather. Yagi held his jaw shut to keep blood from shooting out of his mouth. Grandfather. I know I'm not as young as I used to be, but do I really look that old? Yonda gave him a funny look, and Yagi didn't quite understand what it meant. Well, I'll have some waffles and a coffee. Decaf. Yagi ordered. You sure about that? The waitress asked, raising an eyebrow. I could not deal with a bunch of rich brats with caffeine. Yonda rolled her eyes. Quite sure, caffeine doesn't really mix well with my current condition. Yagi laughed. Oh, that makes sense. The waitress said as she jotted his order down. Poor old man. Has to deal with health issues on top of all this bullshit. Okay, then how about drinks? Hand-squeezed lemonade. Yami and Yonda said at the same time, immediately getting the most expensive thing on the menu. Orange juice. Kyoko ordered. Water, Amaya ordered. With lots of ice, Pepsi, Mina ordered. Really young Ashido? A soda first thing in the morning? Not sure your parents would approve. Yagi said. Mina stuck out her tongue at him. Alright, if that's all I'll go get your order ready. It's gonna take a while though. The waitress said, looking at Yami. That's fine, we're in no rush, Yagi said. With that, the waitress very quickly left their table. I can't believe we had to get them an entirely separate booth. Yonda said to everyone else. Turns out Yami had ordered so much food that there wasn't even space for everyone else's order. So they stuck him in a separate booth and had all his food on the table in front of him, as well as some on some smaller tables next to him. Amaya was with him in that booth with her own food, as Yami had conceded to, needing some help finishing everything. And they were determined to leave no leftovers. Seriously, where does it all go? Mina said as she watched the two of them destroy their food, while she slowly ate some of her own. Well, he did grow up in the woods eating raw meat, so it makes sense that young Yami would appreciate food like this, Yagi said as he sipped his coffee. That makes sense, but, man did not take that girl for a heavy eater, Mina noted, before she noticed Kyoko making a peculiar expression. That being she was actually smiling. It's not that Kyoko never smiled, it's just she didn't smile around Mina or her classmates, so she rarely ever saw it. Kyoko was thoroughly enjoying her pancakes, eating them slowly, and savoring every single bite. Kyoko loved chocolate. And she quite enjoyed pancakes as well. And while this wasn't the first time she had the combination of the two, that didn't make the experience any less euphoric. For a minute, she forgot that she was outside, surrounded by unknown people. Wah! But only for a minute. Everyone looked to a nearby booth, and saw a very young boy, sitting with his parents, crying his eyes out. I want that. The child cried, pointing to all the food Yami and Amaya were eating. I want that. Son, you couldn't eat all that. His father said. I'm not sure how they can eat all that. Yes, I can. I want it. The child demanded. The child continued to cry, making unreasonable demands the entire time. Kyoko stared at the child and their family clenched her fork tightly, and Yonda paid very close attention to Kyoko's thoughts. Just shut up. She heard Kyoko think. Not now, Kyoko. I'm busy. Yonda heard another voice in Kyoko's head. A voice that she assumed was her original father's voice. But I'm hungry. She heard another voice, this time sounding like an even younger Kyoko. Yonda had to really focus in. She assumed what she was hearing was a memory. And memories could be rather tricky to listen to for multiple reasons. The main reason was she couldn't see what was happening, only hear. And memories, unlike Kyoko herself, Yonda could only hear the parts of a memory that the person was actively thinking about, meaning she often didn't get the full picture. Daddy, I'm so hungry it hurts. She heard the younger Kyoko say. I'll feed you when I'm done. Just go away. Her father shouted, Mommy, can I please have some food? She heard the young Kyoko ask. Ask your father. She heard now a more mature female voice, which she assumed was her mother, said dismissively. But he said little Kyoko got cut off. Look, Mommy has stuff to do, so if you want food, ask your father. Her mother said, sounding very annoyed. But once again poor little Kyoko got cut off. I said ask your father. Make Me repeat myself again, and you won't be getting any food for the rest of the day. Her mother told her. Just tell him to shut up. Kyaku thought, seemingly out of her flashback. Scream. Yell. Threaten him. You can't be like him. You can't. You can't be like him? Interesting. Yonda thought. Meanwhile, Yami had noticed the significant increase in Kyaku's negative emotions and took a good long look at her. Anger was the most prominent emotion, and it made the most sense. That crying was really annoying. But he was also picking up a good amount of sadness, fear, and envy. All of which confused him. He knew this was going to be difficult. Hence why he asked Yonda to come along. Hopefully, with their combined information, they could fully understand Kyaku. Eventually, the parents convinced their kid to stop, but Kyaku continued to glare at the family. Yonda and Yami weren't the only people to notice Kyaku's changing mood. Mina had also noticed and planned on doing something about it. Hey, Kyaku, your pancakes are gonna get cold if you don't start eating them again. Mina reminded her. That did the trick at breaking Kyaku out of her one-sided staring contested, as her eyes widened, and she quickly took another bite of her food. Yami could see the negative emotions die down significantly, although her mood was still much worse than it was previously. Hey, so you really like chocolate, huh? Mina asked Kyaku. I heard that Sato's triple chocolate cake is absolutely to die for. And as someone who's tasted his brownies before, I can confidently say, that man knows his chocolate. Really? Kyaku was now hooked, having seemingly forgotten about the earlier incident, as she and Mina got into a discussion about chocolate. Damn it, I was getting good info. Yonda thought, giving Mina a brief glare. She couldn't really blame Mina for, well, making her sister not as miserable, but she was impeding her goals a bit, as now Kyaku's thoughts were filled with chocolate instead of anything useful. Yonda, her emotions were strange. She heard Yami think. She didn't look back though. She didn't want things to seem suspicious. We need to talk. Soon. She gave him a secret thumbs up, before making her move. Excuse me, I need to use the bathroom. Yonda then got up, and went towards the bathroom, giving Yami a look that indicated she wanted him to follow. Me too, Yami said, before quickly heading off in the same direction. Are you sure we should be talking in here? Yami asked her, as they both stood in the men's bathroom. It's fine. Yonda rolled her eyes. Trust me, no one will bother us here. As if on cue, a man suddenly walked into the bathroom, and saw them. He opened his mouth to tell Yonda she shouldn't be here, but Yonda gave him a glare and told him. Get out or I'll tell your date about body pillow collection. The man's face turned white in fear for a second before he immediately turned around and left. Yonda smirked and turned back to Yami. I like to keep track of useful information I find in people's minds. Like that. You know, in case it becomes useful. That sounds kind of evil but okay. Yami thought. Moving on, you said her emotions were weird? What does that mean? Yonda asked. Right. She mostly angry when boy cried. But also there was sad. And fear. And jealous. Yami explained. Huh. Well, I can understand the anger. Be glad you can't hear that kid's thoughts. I promise you it was more annoying than his crying, but aside from that, she was also reliving some really bad memories about her parents. Which is probably also where the fear and sadness come from. But jealousy? Are you sure? Yonda asked him. Yami nodded. Jealousy is easy to see. It's very green. But sick green. Like vomit. It looks gross. Still, why would she be feeling jealous? Yonda thought about it for a moment. Unless she was jealous about the parents being nice. But she has a nice dad now. Izuku's great. Better than those two ever could be. So what is she jealous of? We need more information. Yami thought. That much is clear, although that pink idiot is gonna make things difficult. Yonda scowled. She's great at cheering people up. You don't like her much. Yami pointed out. It's not that I don't like her, it's that I don't like stupid people. Yonda admitted. They never think, so it's hard for me to understand them. Not her fault. Yami told her. I know, it's just frustrating. It's a reminder that I'm actually deaf. Yonda sighed. Anyway, we'll need to keep a close eye on her. So stay focused. Don't let food or your little girlfriend distract you. Not girlfriend, but okay. Yami responded. She will be one day. Because she is definitely developing a crush on you, and you're definitely not getting anyone better. Not because you're a bad person, but because you look like a monster. Yonda was not afraid of hurting Yami's feelings here because, as someone who could read thoughts, she knew perfectly well that these kinds of comments did not affect Yami at all. He had pretty thick skin when it came to this kind of stuff. Seriously, she's pretty, and she has a good personality? Do you have any idea how rare that is? Tell her you're learning how to cook, and get that relationship in the bag. No, Yami told her. Any more useful information? Well, she did think something odd. They can't be like him. That's what she was thinking. Yonda told him. I don't know what it means at the moment, but with more time, I'm confident we can figure it out. Right? Nothing else? Yami asked. Nope. Yonda told him. K. With his business done, Yami proceeded to walk past her out of the bathroom, intent on finishing his meal. Yonda sighed and shook her head. This is going to be a very long day. Chapter 87, Bad Luck. Author's Notes. You're probably wondering where the Christmas and New Year's chapters were. Well, there is no New Year's chapter. Sorry about that, but like I said, I was very busy. There is, however, a Christmas chapter. It's a part of the spin-off story, I Don't Own an Orphanage Future. I didn't want to disrupt the current arc, so I put it there instead. I also made another chapter after that, featuring Yami fighting a villain. So check those out if you're interested. Anyway, on to the chapter. The next destination was an arcade. It was a rather large arcade, meaning that there were plenty of different games and activities for them to do. But it seems like Mina and Mai were stuck on one game in particular. Oh yeah. Get wrecked, Pinky. Mai shouted, as she and Mina competed at Dance Dance Revolution. Mai had put her hair up in a ponytail and had a serious expression on her face. Shifting into Gaming Mai. Gaming Mai was much less kind than normal Mai, as her competitive spirit took complete control over her mind, body, and soul. Not bad for a half pint. Mina said as she matched Mai's pace. But you'll have to do better than that. All Might, Yami, Yonda, and Kyaku looked at the intense competition in front of them. I have a feeling they're gonna be at this for a while. All Might chuckled, before turning to the children. Well then, go have fun, children, but remember to stay together. I need to use the bathroom. Perfect? Yonda thought, grinning, with a sinister glint in her eye. Now it's just the three of us. No one to get in our way. Well, dear sister, brother. Yonda grabbed her two siblings' arms and pulled them towards some games. Let's go play. It had been about half an hour, and nothing eventful happened. They just played games and had fun. That was all well and good, but she had a job to do. And so now they were at skee ball, playing it normally until Kyaku accidentally dropped one of her balls on the floor. She was about to try and pick it up when the man who was playing next to them picked it up first and offered it to her. Here you go, little lady. The man said, giving her a kind smile as he offered the ball. Kyaku glared at the man, as she slowly reached for the ball. Damn it, stop pretending to be nice. Show me who you really are. Kyaku thought. Meanwhile, Yami noticed Kyaku's emotions suddenly flare up. As anger, fear and sadness filled her once more. Interesting. Kyaku took the ball back, and the man smiled at her, receiving nothing but a glare in return. You're not kind. No one is buying it. You're not my family. Only they can be kind. That's some logic she's got there. Yonda thought to herself. Fear and sadness is back. Yami thought, sharing that information with Yonda. Still doesn't make much sense to me. Yonda thought. Even now, I still don't understand her. Why is she so determined to think everyone else is terrible? Well, if this was easy, then I guess I wouldn't have been hired. Well, I guess I should leave the theorizing for later. I'll just continue to observe for now. They continued to play around the arcade for about an hour. The trio was currently playing a basketball game, and not doing too well, to say the least. Kyoko pouted. This game sucks. Doesn't suck, we're just bad at it. Yami pointed out. Lot of people love it. I think. I don't understand the appeal. Yonda said, before noticing something. Huh? Leave me alone. They heard someone cry. All of them turned, and saw a young boy, holding a bunch of tickets, cowering in fear against one of the arcade machines, as another boy loomed over him threateningly. Sure, just give me the tickets. The other boy said, his fingers turning into drills and spinning around threateningly. Unless you want to see what my quirk can do to you. Good grief. Yonda shook her head in distaste. Yami was about to step in when he noticed a change in Kyoko's feelings. He looked at her, and even without the use of his quirk, he could see a change in her mood. With her smirking to herself, and with his quirk, he saw that this development seemed to please her for some reason. Which was pretty alarming. Horrible. People are horrible. Kyoko thought to herself. Why is she so happy about that? Yonda thought. However, they didn't have much more time to think about that, because the bully's drill fingers were getting far too close to the victim boy's skin. Yami. Please go and scare him with your face. Yonda asked her brother. Yami nodded and walked up to the boy. Hey, Yami said, from behind the boy. Leave. Huh. Do you want? The boy turned around and saw Yami's face, and all the confidence left him in an instant, and his own face went almost as white as Yami's. Run, Yami commanded, as black goop started leaking from his mouth, and the boy could almost swear Yami's blood-red eyes glowed threateningly. Or else. The boy's fight or flight instincts kicked in, and he booked it. He ran away so fast that he tripped, and hastily pulled himself up, and ran out of sight. Yami turned his head towards the bullied child, who looked at him with the same amount of terror as the bully. The red-eyed boy shrugged and returned to his siblings. Done. HMPH. He gets saved and he doesn't even look grateful. Kyoko pouted, trying to hide her smug look. Because they're cowards. All cowards. Yeah. Is she trying to reassure herself? Yonda gave her little sister a confused look. Does she want people to be terrible? Now, sometimes people confused Yonda. Just because she could hear their thoughts, didn't mean they always made sense. Or at least didn't make sense to her. This was one of those times. I'll have to talk with Yami later. This is just bizarre. Yonda shook her head. That girl is a mess. So she get upset when people help her. And happy when people are mean. Yami summarized. The two had decided to have their conversation outside of the arcade, away from prying eyes and ears. Yup. It's almost as if the girl wants to believe the world is full of bad people. Yonda told him. There was a pause, as Yami took a second to think that over. Maybe she does. Yami retorted. Maybe she wants to believe that world is bad. And gets angry when belief is shown to be no good. That actually almost makes sense. But why? Yonda asked. What possible reason could she have for wanting the world to be horrible and filled with bad people? Good question. Yami responded as he got back to thinking. The two stayed there and thought for a while, but no ideas came to them. No matter how much they thought. This going nowhere. Yonda said, getting irritated by the whole event. We'll have to keep watching her. See what more we can find. All right. Yami nodded. Go back inside. After spending another few hours in the arcade, they finally exited, with Mina and Mai holding a ton of prizes. Kyaku left with a small stuffed horse and a smile on her face. "Hey sis." Yonda grabbed Kyaku's shoulder and separating her from the rest of the group. "Let's use the bathroom." "Huh? But I don't need to use the bathroom," Kyaku told her. "Yes, you do." "No, come on," Yonda said as she began dragging Kyaku back into the arcade. After the two went into the girls' bathroom and shut the door behind them. "Okay, what do you want?" Kyaku asked, not particularly pleased about being dragged here against her will. "I just wanted to talk a little bit," Yonda said in her sickeningly sweet tone. "So, what do you think of Mai?" Kyaku turned away, whiling pouting heavily, before thinking something Yonda wasn't meant to hear. "She's too nice. And she loves her parents too much. Lucky. 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 She's just lucky. She's fine," Kyaku told her, not noticing all the stuff she'd accidentally told her. "Is that so? And what about Mina?" Yonda asked. "She's too nice too. I bet she's like and has sucky parents." Once again, this was something Yonda was most likely not meant to hear. "So it's all about her parents then?" Yonda concluded. "She's okay," Kyaku told her grudgingly. "Why are you asking me all this?" "No reason. We can go now," Yonda told her, immediately walking towards the exit. "What? Wait, what was that all about?" Kyaku ran to catch up to her. Yonda just shrugged. "I told you it was nothing. Just wanted to pick your thoughts." Alright, we are approaching the end of this mini-arc. Chapter 88, Why Me? The last location they'd be visiting tonight was the place Yami had been eager to visit. A festival. A pretty sizable one as well. Filled to the brim with games, art, prizes, and most importantly, food. The moment Yami stepped onto the festival ground, and the aromas of all the different dishes, he was gone. Simply put, he was on cloud 9 and no one could pull him down. And Mai was not far behind, standing beside Yami as the two of them just stood there with their eyes closed, taking in the smells with huge smiles on their faces and tears in their eyes. "It's beautiful," Mai whispered blissfully. "So beautiful." "Yes," Yami agreed. "Beautiful. I think you two like food a bit too much," Mina joked, patting Yami on the head. "Nonsense," Yami and Mai said sharply. Yagi chuckled a bit behind them. "I think enjoying food is a wonderful thing. Trust me, as someone who can't quite enjoy that aspect of life to its fullest anymore, I think these two should take every opportunity to enjoy all sorts of cuisine. So don't be afraid to eat up." "We won't," Yami said, as he and Mai quickly moved towards the food stalls. "Yonda. Leaving this to you, of course, you glutton," Yonda thought to herself as she rolled her eyes. Beep. Beep. "Your phone is ringing. Your phone is ringing." Suddenly Yagi's phone started ringing. He took it out and his eyes widened when he looked at who was calling. Kathleen Bate. "Go on without me for a while, kid. I need to take this," Yagi told them, as he walked away. "Alright you two, looks like it's just the three of us," Mina said to Yonda and Kyaku. "So kids, where do you want to go first?" "I want to play a game first," Yonda said before she grabbed Kyaku by the hand. "Follow me, sister." The first game they decided to play was goldfish scooping. And Kyaku looked like she was about to cry. No matter how hard she tried, the paper bowl would keep breaking each time she tried to scoop a fish. "Oh, come on!" Kyaku shouted in frustration as the bowl broke again. "Hey! Your scoops are far too aggressive, young one. The bowl is fragile, but your movements are too strong. Patience is needed to win this game," the old man who was running the game told her with a kind smile. And Kyaku responded in kind, with a heavy glare. Man, she is a very sore loser, Yonda thought, holding up her own bag full of goldfish as she heard the onslaught of swears Kyaku was slinging at the man in her head. Seeing that Kyaku was not having a good time, to say the least, Mina decided to step in. "Alright, let's go somewhere else," "Thanks, sir," Mina told the old man as she led the two girls away. Kyoko pouted as Mina led her away, not at all pleased, and her mood only worsened when something caught her eye. It was a small family. A father and a mother, with their daughter in between them. She was holding both her parents' hands and had a huge grin on her face. Her parents looked just as happy, with soft smiles as they looked down at their daughter. It was a wholesome sight that sent Kyoko into a rage. "Lucky. Lucky. Lucky. You don't even know how good you have it." Honestly, Yonda didn't even need to hear Kyoko's thoughts to understand that she was really upset. Her face held an expression of pure fury, and she looked even closer to crying than before. For a second, Yonda thought she was going to cry. But then, she suddenly started to calm down, or rather she started trying to calm down, taking a deep breath and trying to calm herself. "Why does it hurt so much? I have a family, now. I love them so much. But why does it still hurt? Daddy loves us all so much. And I love him. So why does it still hurt?" Kyoko was still trying to calm herself down, to little avail. She was trying to hold back tears and sniffling. It was upsetting to look at. And of course, Mina took note of it almost immediately. Her eyes widened when she noticed the state of the small girl. She quickly kneeled down in front of Kyoko. "Hey, Kyoko, what's wrong?" "Nothing." Kyoko sniffled, looking away from her as some tears finally started welling up in the corners of her eyes. "I'm fine." "You don't look okay," Mina said, pointing out the obvious but in an obviously concerned way. "Hey, it's okay, we can go home early if that's what you want." "I said I'm fine," Kyoko shouted, attracting some attention from the people around them. "Come on girl, we both know that's not true," Mina said in a somewhat comedic tone, smiling at her, hoping to lift the mood but once again, to no avail. "And that's okay." "No, it's not," Kyoko cried, tears actually spilling out of her eyes now. "It's not okay. These feelings should go away." I don't know what feelings you're talking about, honey, but if you want to talk about it." Mina once again tried to reach out to her, but was once again turned away. "Go away. I want my daddy," Kyoko shouted, turning away from Mina. "I want my daddy." Meanwhile, Yonda couldn't actually hear any of this, of course. All she could hear was "Daddy can fix this. Daddy, please come make this better," and things like that. Kyoko just calmed down. Yonda tried to tell her, "Let's just go home and Daddy will know." Kyoko shouted, forgetting that Yonda couldn't hear her, but she could read her expression well enough to get what she was saying. "Get out of my head. Go away." Kyoko then turned and started running away. "Oh crap. Kyoko, wait." Mina started running after her, quickly turning her head to Yonda. "Yonda, please go find Mr. Yagi and tell him what's happening." "Okay," Yonda told her, before quickly running back towards the entrance. Despite Kyoko trying to get away from her, Mina stayed right behind her, easily keeping pace with her. This should be obvious as she was both older and far more athletic. You couldn't be in the hero course if you got outrun by little girls who rarely exercise. Still, she didn't really try to stop her, as that might be detrimental to calming her down. She figured it would just be better to let her run out of energy. And so the chase continued, with Kyoko eventually running into the forest nearby. Kyoko kept running through the forest, tears in her eyes, impairing her vision, so when a small rock appeared in her path, she easily tripped over it. She fell forward, skidding across the ground, scraping her knee, and getting dirt all over her clothes. "Kyoko!" Mina shouted. She quickly ran up to the fallen girl, who was now crying even harder because of the pain. Hey, it's okay. It's just a scrape. It's just a scrape, you'll be fine. Here." Mina quickly pulled out a bottle of water and a handkerchief. She poured water on the wound, cleaning it really quickly, before wrapping her handkerchief around the wound. "There you go." Kyoko watched Mina internally, torn between being upset, wanting to calm down, and wanting her wound attended to. Once Mina finished cleaning her wound, the acid girl sat down in front of her and gave her the kindest smile she could muster. "Hey, it's okay. You can tell me what's wrong?" Deku sniffled, and turned her head away, refusing to answer. Mina sighed internally, but, on the outside, she remained calm and patient. "All right. You don't want to talk, you don't have to. But I'm taking you home. Your daddy wouldn't be very happy if he knew I kept you in a place that made you cry." HMPH. Deku huffed in dissatisfaction but has long since run out of the energy needed to argue, as well as the will to want to. "You did your best, it's not your fault. We know what you think of people," Mina told her gently. "We're all just hoping one day, you'll know that people can be nice. And being around them isn't so bad. I know that." Deku suddenly exploded, Mina's words having hit something inside her that caused anger to burst from inside her. "I already know that." Mina flinched, her eyes widened in shock as Deku's voice was so loud it resonated through the forest, carrying with it her anger and pain. "I know that. I've known that for a long time," Deku continued to shout as loud as her little lungs would let her. "You all keep saying it over and over again. I know, and I hate it. I know people can be nice. I know people do nice things. I know parents besides daddy can love their children. So why didn't they love me?" After letting that all out, Deku started breathing heavily, trying to regain all the air she just let out, her face now red and sweaty, and tears were still pouring down her cheeks. There was a period of silence as Deku took a second to calm down and regain her breath, and Mina didn't know what to say, or if she should say anything at all quite yet. "If people can be so nice, then why did I have to go through all that?" Deku asked, her voice now low and broken, sounding more like a sob than anything. "Why did my parents make me go hungry when other parents don't? Why did my parents never hug me? Or smile at me? Or love me at all?" Mina could feel her heart break with each word coming out of the girl's mouth. She'd known this girl had been damaged by her previous parents, but now she finally got to see exactly how damaged she really was. But I should be fine now." Deku sobbed. "I have a daddy that loves me a whole lot. And I have sisters and brothers and they love me too. And I play with them, and I have fun. I'm happy. But when I see people being all happy, and families being happy and loving each other, I feel like how I used to. I feel angry and saddened and jealous. But why do I feel jealous? I have what they have now. What do I still feel like that? Why do I still want people to be bad, so I don't feel like that? I know it's not good. I should stop feeling like that. Like Eri and K. They're not like this. They don't get angry and sad, and jealous. They don't hate people. So why am I like this?" Deku looked up at Mina, with red puffy, tear-filled eyes, and asked, "Is there something wrong with me? Is that why mommy and daddy didn't love me?" And that's when Mina's heart shattered into a million pieces. Her body moved before she could think, and she immediately brought the girl into a hug, pressing her against her chest, and rubbing circles into her back. "No." Her voice was firm. Strong. Stronger than she felt. Because, honestly, Mina wanted to cry. She wanted to cry at the sight of the broken girl in front of her. That her monstrous parents had hurt her this bad and left wounds this deep. And on the inside, her heart sobbed. But on the outside, she remained unshaken, because she had to be. What this girl needed was a rock. Something stable to latch onto for the moment. And since her father wasn't here, she would have to do. And so she summoned strength she didn't know she had. "I'm sorry, Deku. I'm so sorry you had to go through all that. But I need you to know, what happened with your old parents was not your fault." Mina told her. Sometimes bad things just happen. And it's not about what you did. You were just born into a bad family. "Why?" Deku asked, sobbing into Mina's shirt, her tiny hands clutching it with all her might. "Why me? Mina took a deep breath. There was really only one answer she could give. The truth. And it was gonna be really, really hard to say. I'm sorry Kyoku, there isn't a reason. It's just bad luck. That didn't make Kyoku feel any better, if anything it made her feel worse. All that pain she went through, all the pain she was still going through. Over bad luck. She knew that was the case, already. But that's why she wanted to believe that people were naturally just bad. Because then it wouldn't be that she had bad luck. That she was unlucky and suffered for it. But she knew that it was just a lie she told herself. And in the end, hearing Mina say it, she couldn't hide behind that lie anymore. She didn't want to hide behind that lie. She had to let it go, and that hurt. It hurt so much. And so Kyoku did what most children do when they're hurt. She cried. And cried. And cried. Mina just waited patiently, letting the little girl sob into her shirt for who knows how long. It felt like hours passed until suddenly they heard a familiar voice. There. It was Yami. He'd probably used his quirk to see the geyser of negative emotions coming off Kyoku. Mina heard the sound of footsteps rapidly approaching them until she saw Izuku running towards them. Kyoku! Izuku shouted. He looked tired, out of breath. But most of all he looked worried out of his mind. Hearing his voice, Kyoku perked up. Daddy? Kyoku! Izuku shouted her name again as he got closer and closer to the two of them. Daddy! Kyoku quickly moved to get out of Mina's embrace and Mina opened her arms to let her escape, knowing that now was the time for her to let go. Kyoku ran towards Izuku, who was already running towards her. Izuku swept her into a hug, picking her up and holding her in his arms, and she wrapped her arms and legs around him, holding on to him like her life depended on it. Oh, Kyoku. I'm so glad you're okay. Daddy, I want to go home. Kyoku told Izuku in a still very broken-sounding voice. That's okay sweetie, we're going home right now, Izuku told her. It's okay. We're going home. Meanwhile, behind him, Yagi, Amei, Yami, and Yonda all arrived, with Yagi, in particular, struggling for breath. Finally. We made it. The secret pro hero said as he tried to catch his breath. What's happening? Why is Kyoku crying? Amei asked looking quite upset. Here she was, enjoying the food when suddenly something like this happens. Well, it looks like our dear sister had a bit of a breakdown. Yonda explained, her expression being a mix of concerned and annoyed. Yami's expression was as usual hard to read. But he definitely looked upset. Mina then walked over to them, and fell on her butt, looking more exhausted. Oh my god, I'm so tired. Young Ashido, can you tell me what happened exactly? Yagi asked. It's a long story, Mina responded. The trip back to the Midoriya household was quiet. No one really knew what to say, or if anything they said would be appropriate, so they just kept their mouths shut, the only sounds being that of the car, the city around them, and Kyoku's sniffles. By the time they got back, it was already night time, and given how physically and emotionally exhausted Kyoku was, it was decided that Izuku would put her to bed. However, given that Kyoku didn't want to leave his side, Izuku decided that she would sleep with him tonight. Kyoku snuggled up to Izuku's side, as she laid in his bed, cozied up under the covers. Izuku pet her head, trying to soothe her so she could go to sleep. It's okay Kyoku, just go to sleep, I'll be right here with you. I promise. Daddy. You love me, right? Kyoku asked, a hint of desperation in her tone. I love you, and I love all your siblings, more than life itself, Izuku told her, his voice firm and absolute. Never doubt that Kyoku. I will always love you. I love you too Daddy. Kyoku sniffled, somehow hugging him even tighter. Daddy. Why am I so weak? Kyoku, you're not weak, Izuku told her. Why would you think that? Because I'm still letting the past hurt me. Kyoku explained. Eri and Kat it much worse than I did. And they're over it. They don't have problems going outside and being around people. Oh, Kyaku. Izuku sighed. It's not that you're weak, Eri and Kar. They have a degree of mental strength that most people just don't have. I'm willing to say that 99% of people just don't have the strength of mind to endure everything they have and keep going like that. It's kind of absurd. Although I do think you helped Eri a lot by erasing some of those memories. Still, though, it's not fair to compare yourself to them. That'd be like me comparing my strength of All Mights. You're not weak, you're just normal. And that's okay. It's okay to not be able to let things go right away. It's okay to be upset that bad things happen to you. It's okay to be hurt. And I'm sorry if I haven't exactly been leading by example. And I haven't provided you all the help you needed. And I'm so sorry that you had to suffer because of it. It's not your fault, Daddy, you've been busy. Kyoko tried to defend him. No, Kyaku. My job, first and foremost, is to make sure you're okay. I should have gotten you all therapist. Izuku told her, shaking his head. It's my responsibility as a parent to make sure you don't have to suffer like this. And I promise you will get help. You're going to grow, and I will help you make sure your past doesn't hurt you anymore. Kyoko almost started crying again. The sheer love and affection in his words, all directed at her. His determination to care for her, to love her. It helped her remember that in this moment, she is loved. I love you, Daddy. Kyoko said, her heart full and feeling like it was going to burst. Thank you for loving me. Izuku smiled. No need to thank me. You made that easy. That actually did make Kyoko cry. She softly sobbed tears of joy as she snuggled against Izuku's arm. The exhaustion finally overtook her, and she almost instantly fell asleep, tears still streaming from her eyes. Once Izuku was sure she was asleep, he turned his attention to the door. You guys can come in now. After a moment, the door opened and Mina, Yagi, Yonda, and Yami came in. Now, tell me everything that happened, Izuku told them before he turned to Yami and Yonda. And you too. I thought you two might be up to something earlier, and I just let it go because I assumed it would be harmless, but now I'm telling you, what were you two doing? It took about half an hour to explain it all. Fortunately, Kyoko was in a very deep sleep, so nothing short of the end of the world would be waking her up. Okay. Izuku sighed, having taken in all that information. He turned once again to his two children. You two. I'm not upset, because I know you had good intentions. But for the future, do not, under any circumstances, perform psychological experiments on your siblings without them knowing. Or on anyone for that matter, really. Don't mess with people's heads without consent. Yes, Dad, Yami said dejectedly. I'm sorry, Father. Yonda said, equally as dejected. Like I said, I'm not upset. I'm happy you two wanted to help her, but next time you have an idea like this, tell me first, and we can talk about it. Okay? Izuku said, getting nods from both kids. Good, now go back to your rooms and get ready for dinner. The two children left, still looking bummed about how things turned out, something Izuku would no doubt have to handle at a later point. Izuku then turned his gaze towards Mina. Thank you for handling that as well you did. I'm so glad I sent you to go and not someone like Todoroki. Hey, yeah, that probably would have ended in disaster. Mina chuckled. But you don't need to thank me, I'm doing my job. Both literal job, and my job as a decent human being. Izuku smiled. Well, I'm happy to have someone as capable as you working here. Even if it's only temporary. Oh shucks, you're making me blush? Mina grinned, although that only showed a fraction of how actually happy she was to receive this kind of praise. And with that said, you getting a raise, Izuku told her. Eh? Mina gasped, her eyes widening. Wait. I'm not opposed to getting more money, but I don't really think what I did warrants a raise or anything. I mean, I'm already getting paid a lot. Mina, I didn't. I asked if you wanted a raise. I said you getting a raise, Izuku told her. I'm doubling what you were getting before. Doubling? Mina almost fell on her butt from shock. Is that really okay? It's fine. I told you, it's not up for discussion. You're getting paid double, foregoing plus ultra when it counted. Izuku said firmly. Hey, I'd suggest you, just take the raise, young Ashido. Young Midoriya can quite stubborn when it comes to things like this. Yagi told her, his voice filled with amusement. Mina took a second to take that in, before giving a fake exasperated sigh. Geez. My boss is so unreasonable. Well, I guess I have no choice. Izuku smiled. Exactly. Now, you are free to go. I have some things to discuss with Mr. Yagi. Yeah, there was kinda one more thing I wanted to talk to you about, Mina said. I wanted to ask if I could work here part-time, like, after this whole thing with UA was over. Izuku's eyes widened. Really? Yeah, I mean. Mina sighed, her happy-go-lucky expression melting into one that was more upset and frustrated. It's not fair. It's really not fair that these kids had to go through all that. I always respected what you were doing here, helping kids that need help. It's a pretty great thing to do. And I really respect how much effort you put into it, but I don't think I understood just how important your job was, or how much these kids needed help. The stuff with Kiba was a bit of an eye-opener, and after the interview and the stuff you said about Hiri's past. Ugh. But this was. I've never seen a kid so broken. I never want to see a kid so broken. It broke my heart to see her that way. But I'm glad I was there for her. Because I hate thinking about what would have happened if she was alone. Izuku nodded. Kyoko was very, very affection-starved. So having someone who cared about her nearby when she was feeling like how she did, was very important. It's why he sent someone like Mina in the first place. These kids deserve to be happy, and loved, and get lots of hugs. Mina said, sounding very determined. And since you can only give so many hugs at once, I want to be there to give them even more hugs. I see. Izuku turned his head up towards her and gave her a relieved smile. Thank you for caring so much about them. We can talk about the terms of your employment later, but you definitely have the job if you want it. All right. Thanks, sir. I promise I won't let you down. Mina swore, giving him a salute. After today, I have every bit of confidence you won't, Izuku said. Now please leave me and Mr. Yagi alone for a while. We really need to talk. Got it, sir? See you in the morning. Mina said, before exiting the room, finally leaving Izuku and All Might alone. Now All Might. You mentioned something about someone wanting to contact me, asking about a job. Izuku inquired. Right, have you ever heard of Cold Bait? All Might asked him. I don't think so, but that last name does sound familiar, Izuku said, trying to recall where he knew that name from. Well, you're probably more familiar with her older sister, Kathleen Bate. All Might explained. Or as she's more well known as, Star and Stripe. Alright, and we have reached the end of the chapter. Yeah, a lot of people assumed Kyoko's issues were about as deep as they first appeared. She got hurt by people, so she's distrustful of people. And they wouldn't blame them for thinking that. After all, pretty much everyone in the story thought that, and I specifically wrote it in a way to make people think that, but I wanted to make her a bit deeper. And this is actually in relation to her quirk. You see, quirks in the MHA world have an effect on people's personalities. This can obviously be seen in people like Bakugo, who has an explosive personality, people like Shigaraki who are very destructive, and people like Toga who is very bloodthirsty. Literally. Tokoyami is dark and edgy like his quirk, Okiko is typically bubbly and uplifting. And Ojiro is plain. This can also be seen in the characters I've created. Kiba is headstrong and often goes through life using brute force. Netsu has a fiery passion. Fu is dead inside. For Kyaku, this manifests in her being stuck in the past. She has a harder time moving on when compared to others, and she's a very resentful person who has difficulty letting things go. And it's not just her quirk, it's also just that the things that happened to her are not so easily forgotten. Especially not so quickly. Because the reality of the situation is, Kyaku's original family did not love her. Her original parents did not love her. That's a pretty hard pill to swallow. And whereas Kandiri have the absurd mental fortitude to, for the most part, look past that and live in the present, Kyaku just doesn't. And that's another thing that really bothers her. Because she lives in a house full of people who have tragic backstories, many of who have had it worse than her, especially Iri and whom she spends the most time with, and they are all either seemingly fine or improving. Even someone like Fuku, who seems the most damaged by her past, is making good progress on moving past that and becoming who she wants to be, whereas Kyaku just isn't. Mostly because her problems aren't as apparent as someone like Fuku. For Kyaku it just seems like she's very distrustful when it's actually so much worse for her. Now here is the truth about Kyaku that I try to make somewhat apparent. If Izuku wasn't raising her, if she stayed in that environment, or even if she had just gone to a regular orphanage, she would have become a villain. No one is born evil. But there are people who are born with traits that make it easier for them to become bad people. Some kids are more selfish or selfless than others, some hold grudges easier, some kids find enjoyment in doing bad things to others, just because it's in their nature, and they don't know any better. And Kyaku is one of those people born with those traits. Let's take for example two characters in the MHA canon. Izuku and Dabi. These two started off more similar than their current selves would lead you to believe, although there are still distinct differences. They both started off with a strong desire to be the #1 hero. They both had pretty good lives at first. Obviously, there were some issues with the Todoroki family just because of the way it came into existence, but it was far less problematic than it will become after Tuya's fake death. But Endeavor seemed like a much better parent, with training that was more actually training than it was abuse, judging by the flashback. Then one day they went to the doctor, and all their hopes and dreams suddenly fell apart. Everyone started to view them differently, and people, including their parents, now discouraged their dream because it was seemingly impossible for them. Both of them refused to give up their dream despite the odds, but it was clear that Tuya was falling apart mentally. Sure, Izuku wasn't doing so great either, but he never got to the point where he would try to set a baby on fire. Now there were some additional factors for Tuya. To be fair, he was born to be a hero, trained most of his short life to be one, and was told he wished to surpass All Might, only for his parents to suddenly give up on him. But during the flashback you start to see that Tuya, on top of having a tragic backstory, is just kind of an unpleasant person in general, getting a lot of his parents' worst traits. Of course, this could have been salvaged with some good old-fashioned good parenting. Unfortunately, while Endeavor and Ray were better parents than they were after Tuya's fake death, they were still pretty lackluster, to say the least. And as such, this leads to the creation of Dabi. Izuku was also given up on by his mother, and by All Might, his idol. But despite all of that, he still ran into a fight he had no chance of winning, to save the person who spent his entire life putting him down and hurting him. And he convinced his idol to change his mind. Despite having every reason to be jealous of others, to resent them, to want to lash out. And he would be justified to hate someone like Rikugo. But he doesn't. Despite everything the world has thrown at him, Izuku stayed true to himself and held onto his beliefs. Whereas Tuya did not. If you swap Tuya and Izuku's lives, Izuku would have convinced Endeavor that he could become a hero, just like he did All Might. He would have become a hero, and instead of trying to set Shito on fire, he would be training him on how to use his flames. Tuya on the other hand would be in jail for killing Bakugo in his sleep. Again, I'm not saying Tuya would always become a villain no matter what situation you put him in. It's just Tuya is more inclined to become a bad person than someone like Izuku. And unfortunately, Kyaku is more like Tuya than she is like Izuku. But, the difference is, Izuku is a much better parent than Endeavor or Ray ever were, so this story gets to have a much happier ending. Now, on to the next topic, Star and Stripe. For the record, my opinion on Star is as such. She was an amazing character that Horikoshi handled wonderfully, except for the fact that she seemingly shows up out of nowhere, has an amazing fight, and then dies. I love Star, I just think she should have gotten more screen time. We're gonna start moving into the part of the story where Izuku is hiring more workers. So get ready for that. Chapter 89. Author's Notes. Alright, so I had got a compelling rebuttal to my claim in the last chapter, that no person is born evil. And this was a proper rebuttal, done politely and properly. So thank you. They pointed out that some people despite growing up in good homes turned into murderers. As well as the fact that some people are born with mental disorders that don't allow them to feel empathy. Of course, I am shortening it down quite a bit, but this is the gist of the counter-argument. My rebuttal. Firstly, yes, people who grow up in a good home can still become horrible people. However, that goes back to my argument about people gravitating towards evil and good parenting. Because good parenting also involves steering your children in the right direction. If you don't make an effort to instill morals into your children, you can give them all the love and care in the world, and they might still grow up to be terrible people. For some children, that is going to be harder than others. And for some children, you're going to need to be more heavy-handed, and dole out harsher punishments. Some parents fail to do that, and as such, we get people growing up well-loved and cared for. They end up as bad people. As for people with mental disorders that keep them from feeling empathy and other such things, well, that's complicated for me to get into, because I am not a professional in the field of mental health, and as such, I can't speak on details about how those things work because I would be speaking out my ass. However, what I do know is that there are many, many people who have these mental illnesses and live perfectly normal lives. I've heard stories of people who have friends and loved ones who have these mental illnesses, but you wouldn't know it unless they told you. It is completely possible that even despite having a mental illness that makes you lack empathy, you can be a better person than someone without that mental illness. My way of viewing this is as such, there are an unfathomable amount of decisions that can be made during a person's life, both by them and the people around them, that can change them for better or worse. And I don't believe there is a single person that will always end up rotten regardless of which one of those paths they walk. It's all about guiding them down the right path. And unfortunately, that can be stupidly difficult, even if a set of parents wants to do everything in their power to raise their child right and make them into a good person. They can get screwed over by either outside elements, or their own lack of knowledge. Because unfortunately being a good person does not equate to being a good parent. As I said earlier, if your child is leaning towards a dark path, and you don't have either the will to force them off that path, or the knowledge needed to pull them off it, or both, then that child will grow into a bad person. I say that anyone can be a good person if they're guided down the correct path in life, but that is easier said than done, as that path is not labeled, nor clear. And so that's my stance. I believe anyone can become a good person, regardless of their nature, but that can be very, very difficult due to circumstances. Anyway, enough with that, on to the fic. It's been an strange week for Riri. First was the interview that revealed her backstory to the world. Now, Izuku had already told her that people would treat her differently after he told them this. Not badly, if anything they'd likely be nicer to her. She didn't fully understand what that meant, and thus didn't know what to expect, but she was hopeful. Although she didn't really know what to think about results. Class 1A universally started looking at her with pity, even the more stoic members like Todoroki and Shinso. And they all started treating her like she was made of glass, giving her a bit more attention and speaking more kindly to her. and Taru just straight broke down sobbing while hugging her, repeating "I'm sorry" over and over again. Her family also all seemed to change the way they looked at her. Some not so much. Just gave her a pat on the back and said everything was going to be alright, and nothing else. Fu did something similar, patting her on the head and praising her mental fortitude. And Netsu burst into her room and said she was awesome for not letting all that keep her down. Some started acting a bit more like 1A. Nara and Shuraku kept giving her those pitying looks, and the latter even gave her a nice dress with a note saying that it was a gift for surviving. Mew even showed his face to her for the first time, asking her if it was true, before giving her a very, very brief hug, and then disappearing. Then there were Fuku, who tried to invite her to a tea party, with some sweets she made herself, but in the end, Fuku just burst into tears and kept apologizing for thinking that she and Eri went through the same thing when Eri's experience was clearly worse. And Eri ended up having to comfort her. The same thing happened with Kai, who was just overwhelmed with grief for what happened to his big sister, getting his massive tears everywhere. It was a messy situation. Even more messy was Kiba's response to the situation. Kiba was just absolutely enraged when she heard about what happened to her. And she did what she normally did when she got angry. Brutalize Fu. In this case, she decided to stream herself, destroying Fu in horrible and creative ways, for almost an hour. Threatening to do the same thing to anyone who tried harm, even a hair on Eri's head. She then afterward proudly showed Eri the comments on that video, and Eri honestly wasn't sure what to think. On the one hand, seeing tens of thousands of people all willing to defend her and wishing her well, was very heartwarming. But on the other hand, seeing tens of thousands of people angrily threatening to commit violent murder against anyone who even looked at her funny, made her a bit uneasy. Eri disliked Overhaul as much as anyone, well, not as much as these people apparently, especially after realizing how unnecessary and spiteful his method of taking blood was. But she didn't like the idea of him getting horribly murdered by enough people. And lastly, Eri was pretty sure Ken was avoiding her. She didn't know why exactly, but whenever she entered a room Ken was in, Ken left. So that was the only conclusion she could come to. Overall, she didn't really know how to feel about all this. It was nice to see how much everyone cared for her, but it was all a bit much. She didn't have much time to think about it though, because then the house got attacked. Well, not really. As it turns out, the cat lady that was attacking them and destroying all the Grimm was just here to ask for a job. But Eri didn't know this at the time, and it terrified her. Being stuck in the practice room with all of her siblings, most of whom were also nervous and afraid while Izuku was out there seemingly in potential danger, was one of the worst experiences of her life since she'd come into Izuku's care. And so when Izuku did in fact end up hiring her, Eri was a bit conflicted at first, but quickly came out feeling positive about the whole thing. Sure, she had scared them and given her an unpleasant experience, but she hadn't meant to. And in the end, the only people that got hurt were the cat woman herself, and a lot of Grimm, but they weren't really living beings anyway. Eri decided instead of focusing on that, she would focus on the fact that they now had a very strong cat lady, protecting them. So that was neat. Even neater was that the shock of the incident took attention away from Eri. People still viewed Eri differently now, and would likely continue to view her differently, but the house was no longer focused on pitying Eri anymore. Although Ken was still avoiding her, much to her chagrin. But she didn't have much time to deal with that before Kyaku apparently had a breakdown. So now she was going to deal with that. Because Eri was a good sister. After waking up next to her father in the morning, Kyaku quickly went back to her own room, eating her breakfast there too, as she wanted to think for a while. And after being alone with her thoughts for a while, Kyaku started asking herself questions about her life, namely, what next? She obviously could just wait and see what the therapist said. But who knows how long it would be until she got to see one, and she wanted something to change now. Kyaku didn't like being the way she was, and in order to change herself, She needed to make some kind of change to how she lived, or how she viewed the world or something. Eventually, there was a knock on the door, and a familiar voice came sounded. "Kyoku? Can I come in?" Having been alone with her complicated thoughts, asking questions she didn't have the answer to, she was more than happy to let Eri come in. She quickly made her way over to the door and opened it up, revealing Eri and Yami on the other side. "Oh, it's you." Kyoku scowled at the pale boy. Izuku told her about Yami and Yonda's machinations, and she was not pleased, to say the least. Yami gave her an apologetic bow. "Sorry I performed psycho experiments on you. I just wanted to understand you. Help you." Kyoku pouted heavily, crossing her arms and giving Yami a light glare. On one hand, the events of yesterday had been pretty horrid. But on the other, Yami did only intend to help her become a more positive person, which she did really want. After taking a second to think it over, she huffed. "Fine, I'll forgive you. But you better not do anything like that ever again. Got it?" Yami nodded. Eri then came in and opened her arms. "Is it okay if I..." Before she could even finish the question, Kyoku nearly launched herself at her and wrapped her own arms around the horned girl. "Yes please." Eri had been taken off guard for a second, but quickly reciprocated the hug. Kyoku took in Eri's affection, drinking it up like a person would water after nearly dying of thirst. The two stayed like this for a while, like a really long while. A bit longer than Eri was prepared for, but she didn't know how to ask to disengage from it, so she just continued on awkwardly, wondering when it was going to stop. Eventually, Kyoku figured out that she'd been hugging her for too long, and did finally let go. "I love you, sis," Kyoku told her, hoping desperately to hear it back. I love you too." Eri was a bit taken off guard by how affectionate she was being, but quickly deduced it was likely because of yesterday's events. "Are you okay?" "I don't know." Kyoku frowned. "Want to talk about it?" Yami asked. Normally Kyoku didn't really like talking about her deeply personal feelings. But maybe that was part of her problem. "Okay." Kyoku sighed, as she got ready to explain. "So, you want to change something about yourself, but you don't know what." Eri summarized after hearing Kyoku's ordeal. "I know Daddy said he would help me, but he has so much to do." Kyoku sighed. "I want to do something by myself, but I can't think of anything." "Find goal," Yami said simply. "Huh?" Kyoku gave him a confused look that begged him to elaborate. "Find goal. Work for goal," Yami told her. "Working for goal makes you feel good. Like doing something with life." "I think I understand," Eri said. "When I do something that makes it feel like I'm improving, I feel good. Like when I do something I think is scary to get better at doing things like that. Or when I learn about medicine and bodies so I can become a doctor. It makes me feel like I exist for a reason." "Me too." Yami nodded. "Like existing for a reason. A goal," Kyoku repeated to herself. She of course wanted to take this advice. After all, it was an idea, which was more than what she had. But then that posed the question, what would her goal be? Would it be some kind of self-improvement? Should it be job-focused? Should it be something simpler? Eri and Yami could see the struggle on Kyoku's face, and could practically hear the gears turning in her head, as she tried to figure out the answer to her question. "Why not learn to help Dad?" Yami asked. Kyoku's eyes widened. "Huh? Dad has lots of work. Hard to do. Takes lots of time. You said you want help him," Yami explained. "Why not learn how to do paperwork and stuff? So Dad has less work." That's a great idea," Kyoku shouted excitedly, her eyes lighting up. The more she thought about it, the more the idea of becoming Izuku's assistant excited her. She'd not only get to help Izuku out and give him more to relax, but she'd get to spend way more time with him as well. It was perfect. Despite only having a goal for less than a minute, the future already felt brighter, and Kyoku felt energized. Immediately she gave Eri another hug. "Thanks, sis." Kyoko jumped off the bed and was about to go to Izuku, but she stopped as she reached for the doorknob, when she realized she forgot something. She turned to Yami, and gave him a thumbs up, before running out of the room. Yami smiled a bit. It wasn't the same thank you Eri had gotten, but it was enough to let him know that he helped. And that was all he really needed. In fact, he didn't even really need that. Yami's reward was watching the negativity in a person disperse, and positivity overtakes it. Because being kind was its own reward. Izuku was trying his hardest to keep it together. Because right now he had to try and be as professional as possible while having a video conference with Star and Stripe, and her younger sister Cole. At this point, after being around All Might as much as he was, you'd think he wouldn't be as overexcited to meet Star and Stripe, especially over a video call. But for some reason, the unexpectedness of it all, and the fact that Star was an international hero, made him giddy inside. But he had to be serious. As he assumed this was important. Cole Bate was not nearly as flashy as her sister, nor as All Might looking was the only way Izuku could describe it. She looked like any ordinary businesswoman, her blonde hair tied up in a ponytail, and her suit neat and tidy. If you took one look at her you wouldn't think she was the younger sister of the strongest woman in the world. "So you must be Izuku Midoriya," Star said, taking a good look at him through the camera. "You really are just a 15-year-old boy. Cassie." Cole scolded her sister. "He's not just a 15-year-old boy. He's a 15-year-old boy who is the head of a foundation that helps children in need. A foundation we are currently asking for help. Show a little respect." Right. Sorry. Hey. Star laughed. "My apologies Midoriya. I'm not the most formal person in the world, so forgive me if I seem a bit rude. Just know that I mean no disrespect. I greatly admire your work, and the effort you put into helping those children. It's no issue." Izuku stuttered, trying not to get riled up at being complimented by America's #1 hero. "I'm not someone who cares about things like that." "Then we should get along swimmingly," Star bellowed. "Now, on to the reason we're here. How much did All Might tell you exactly?" "He told me that Star and Stripe asking my assistance, involving her sister potentially working here," Izuku said. "He said I should get more details from the two of you, and gave me the information needed to set up this call." "I see. That's probably for the best," Cole said. "This way we won't have any misconceptions to deal with." "Right. Now, as you can tell, I am rather confused about why you would want to stop working as head of Star's agency, to go to Japan, and work for me specifically," Izuku told them. Of course, anyone would be confused after hearing that, but I promise you it will all make sense when I explain the situation, Cole assured him. Her voice was very professional, unlike her sister's. In fact, she just to be the opposite of Star in many regards. "All right, please do," Izuku told them. Cole took a deep breath, getting all the facts straight in her head, before laying them out for Izuku. "So this all started a few months ago. When he finally discovered my daughter, Alice's quirk. Destiny dictation." Izuku wanted to shake the hand of whoever named the quirk. It was a powerful name, for what Izuku could only assume was a powerful quirk. It's a rather complicated quirk, which is why it took us so long to figure out it existed and how it works, but I will try to explain it in the most comprehensive way possible, Cole said. The easiest way to explain would be to give an example. Let's say Alice writes down that at 2 o'clock, you will brush your teeth. Then, at 2 o'clock, you will be very strongly compelled, not quite forced but very nearly so, to brush your teeth. It doesn't matter if you already did so unless you have a strong desire not to do so, you will brush your teeth, at exactly 2 o'clock. So, it's a quirk that allows her to force others to do things that she's written that they'll do, Izuku said, trying to wrap his head around it. So she really is a sense, dictating destiny. That's A very powerful quirk. Yes. But there are limitations, Cole told him. Firstly, she has to put in a time. Secondly, she can only influence a person's actions for about an hour a day. Essentially speaking, once she puts in a time, every event she writes has to take place within the hour after time she set, otherwise, it won't have any effect. Unless of course, she does something within that hour that will affect you after the hour is up. Let's say that you start cooking something, but it takes over an hour. She can't make you keep cooking it after the hour is up, but you're likely going to continue doing that anyway. Third, she has to know the full name of the person she's trying to influence, and the person she's trying to influence has to accept that that is their name. Let's say someone's legal name is Barbara, but the person doesn't identify themselves by that name and goes by Sarah. If Alice writes down Barab, it won't have any effect. Fourth, as I said, her quirk strongly influences people to do what she's written. But it can't necessarily force them. It's not quite mind control. She can't force you to do anything you're too strongly against. For most people, she can't force them to take their own lives or set themselves on fire. The person will still feel influenced to do that, but they likely will just shake it off. Also, if you know you're being influenced by Alice's quirk, you can very easily refute it. Fifth is that she can't force you to do anything physically impossible, although she can make you try. And sixth is contradiction. Essentially, if what happens strays away from what she's written, her quirk is nullified. Let's say that she wrote that someone will go into a store, buy bread, leave and then go buy shoes. If the store that person goes into has no bread, then they won't be able to do what Alice wrote, and the rest of what she wrote will be nullified. Meaning they won't have to go and buy shoes. I see. Izuku took that all in, formulating theories and questions in his mind. How specific or vague can these scenarios be? As much as she wants. Although the vaguer she is, the harder it is for her to know exactly what's going to happen. And the more specific she is, the more easily an outside influence can interfere and nullify her quirk's effect. Cole explained. It was a quirk that had a lot of limitations. Strict ones too. Ones that could make the quirk useless if it were used improperly, or if she just got unlucky. But those limitations were almost nothing compared to the possibilities. She could make depressed people end their lives. She could make villains rob a specific bank, and allow the heroes to know exactly where they were going to be and when. She could make someone humiliate themselves, or ruin their whole lives. If she was dedicated enough, she could influence a person's thoughts daily, and condition them to the point where either it was easier to control them, or to the point where she didn't need to use her quirk at all. And all of this without any risk to herself. Heck, it's more than likely the victims wouldn't even know Alice was ever involved. Of course, the most impressive things Alice could do with her quirk would require resources. Namely information about people's names, and possible factors that could nullify her quirk. And if she had those, she could subtly change the world on an unimaginable scale. As you can see, my daughter has a powerful quirk to say the least. Cole sighed. She'd definitely be considered. What were they called again, OPCs? Yes. OPCs. My apologies, we don't have a system for overly powerful children in America, so I'm unfamiliar with the terms. Although we likely should have something in place like what you have with your foundation. I'm working on it. Star said. Ever since I heard about your foundation, I've been pushing to get something similar over here in the States. It's been a bit difficult, but I think I'm making progress. Right. But back to the topic at hand. As you probably know by now, when there are powerful quirks, there are people who want to use them. People may not have the best intentions, but they do have lots of influence. Cole explained, her face and tone dead serious, but Izuku could see a hint of nervousness. As you know, STAR's agency works closely with the American government, and as head secretary, that means I also work closely with the American government. And ever since Alice got her quirk, they've been acting differently. They started contacting me less, and when they do contact me they act far too nice. Not to mention they've been being even more lenient with Star and her agency. The moment that started, I knew they wanted Alice, so I managed to scrape together many of my contacts and resources, and I figured out exactly what they intended to do with Alice, and what they planned to do if I wasn't being cooperative. Needless to say, I can't allow it. Right. They plan to take away her future, and force her to do what's best for them, not her. Izuku summarized angrily. He wasn't surprised by any means. But he sure as hell was upset about this situation. That's unacceptable. Problem is, this isn't a situation I can easily get out of, Cole explained. The government is willing to do a lot to ensure that Alice is under their control, and given the amount of power and influence they have in the country, it's evident I can't stay in America any longer. Star sighed with dismay, looking very distraught at that statement, and Izuku couldn't blame her. Her sister was essentially being forced out of the country, otherwise, her niece's freedom would be at risk. Izuku couldn't imagine how frustrating that must be, especially because the people doing this were the same ones she'd served for so long, and done so much for. But the issue with going to other counties is I have no guarantee that they won't try to do something similar. Cole continued. Having very few options, I called Star to see if we could brainstorm ideas for how to get out of this situation. And so when faced with this perilous situation, I knew there was only one man to call. Star said dramatically. All Might. I told him about our situation, he advised working for you. After all, you have enough power and leverage to hold back the Japanese government, if they try to do anything too heavy-handed with Alice. Not to mention you live in a highly secure facility that should protect her from kidnapping, and there are a bunch of other children with super-powered quirks, so she won't be treated too differently. I see. Izuku thought over it for a minute, before looking at the camera with a look of pure determination. All right, you're hired. Just like that? Cole asked, only sounding slightly surprised. No interview, or screenings or anything? Even if you couldn't perform well as a secretary, which I doubt considering your history, I'd be able to find something for you to do, Izuku told her. But really, the #1 heroes of both Japan and America have asked to aid someone in desperate need of help. I'd never be able to live with myself if I turned you away. See sis. I told you calling All Might was the right idea. Star laughed. Even if he can't punch the problem away, he knows good people. I suppose you're right. The relief in Cole's voice and on her face was very evident. It looked like the world had just been lifted off her shoulders. Even though they weren't necessary in the clear quite yet, it was good that they had a concrete plan in place. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're welcome. But there is something I need to tell you, Izuku said. Currently there is an unknown group that has been trying to kill me for the past month. They seem to be solely focused on me rather than the kids, but I can't guarantee that they won't try to harm them. I've been greatly increasing the security of the house, and I've been in talks with the island about using their technology to increase it even more, although that will take a while. We've yet to have any real leads on the group's identity, other than their quirk supremacist. I doubt your daughter would be in any real danger, and I am loath to say this, if they somehow got past my extensive security then the children would likely take down any attackers they send, while also protecting her from any harm. That being said, I felt like you deserved to know this information. Ah damn it, there's always a catch, Star said, letting out a frustrated sigh. I see. Well, we don't really have any other options. So that doesn't change our decision, Cole said. All right, but, in light of that, I will need you and Alice to undergo mental probing before you arrive. Izuku felt a twinge of guilt immediately after saying that. I'm deeply sorry about having to ask that of you, and even more so for asking that of your daughter. But, given her quirk, it's necessary. Cole gave a sigh of acceptance. Well, it's not just her quirk. Your own quirk is very dangerous in its own right. Izuku pointed out. Cole's quirk was called absolute authority. If she called out the name of someone, she could force them to do whatever she tells them. The only drawbacks was that the person needed to hear her words, and much like her daughter, she needed to know the person's name. It wasn't as powerful as her sister's quirk, but unlike Star, she didn't need to touch anything for her quirk to work. And given that A, people are actively trying to kill me, and B, I have to protect the children at all cost, I can't ignore a potential risk, Izuku told them with a guilty expression. Once I sincerely apologize, that's unnecessary, Cole reassured him. If anything, it's reassuring to see how protective you are. It makes me feel more confident in this plan. I never saw the issue with mental probes. If you've got nothing to hide, then what's the problem? Star asked nonchalantly. Cole let out a long-suffering sigh. We are not having this conversation right now. All right, how much does Alice know about the situation? Izuku asked. Currently, not much. But I plan on telling her soon. Things are going to get very complicated, and a lot of things are going to change. So it'll be important for her to understand the stakes. Cole said. I agree. Izuku nodded, before turning to Star. Star and Stripes just call me Cassie. After all, you're helping us out this much. It would be rude to make you refer to me by my hero name. Star told him. Oh okay. Call Cassie. Izuku stuttered, her face turning red from embarrassment. Please stay with her until she gets here. They're going to get desperate to get Alice at any cost, especially when they learn about her leaving the country. Right, finally time to take those days off, Star replied. We also should move as quickly as possible. The more time we give them, the more anxious they get and the more time they have to plan and pull together their resources. Izuku said. When should I expect you here? A few weeks is the soonest I can come. Cole estimated. Right, I'll see you then, Izuku told them. Please, be careful. I will, but Midoriya, I know I've asked a lot of you, but please promise me that if anything happens to me, you'll take care of Alice. Cole asked, almost begging. Don't say that, Izuku and Star said at the same time. You're going to get here safe, and you and Alice will be able to live in peace, relative peace, Izuku said. That's right. As your older sister, I refuse to let you think such stupid things. Star told her. Right, but I'm just being cautious. Cole once again gave him a desperate look. If something happens to me, Cass, I need you to promise me you'll get Alice to Japan. And Midoriya, please promise me you'll take care of her in my stead. I'm begging you. Izuku looked into her eyes, and he saw the desperation of a mother, worried for her child's safety. I promise. I will take care of her. You have my word. Izuku told her. Thank you. Cole let out another sigh of relief. Sis. Star looked away from the camera. You're both getting to Japan safely. End of story. Sis. Cole let out another sigh, but this one was more disappointed than relieved. End of discussion. Star then put her hand on the computer. This computer will shut off. And with that, she left the call. Did she just? Izuku was in disbelief. Use her quirk to turn the computer off instead of just turning it off normally. Yes, she does that. She does that a lot. Cole sighed. She's so stubborn. Thankfully I don't need to worry about her making that promise all that much. If something happened to me, I know for a fact she would make sure Alice got to you. Before she immediately goes back to the States, and does something stupid. My big sister is such a handful? Well, maybe so. But at least you can say, my sister has saved thousands of lives, that's something. Izuku tried to cheer her up. Cole gave a brief chuckle before a fond smile grew on her face. Yeah, I can. Thank you Midoriya. For everything. I look forward to working with you. I feel the same, Izuku said to her, giving her a kind smile. See you soon and good luck. Cole then ended the call. leaving Izuku alone in his office. He sank back in his chair, letting go of the tension he'd been holding on to the entire conversation. Less than a year ago, he was a nobody who people deemed as so worthless that his nickname was Deku. Now he was the head of a super-rich foundation, with so many children relying on him for help, and All Might contacted him to tell him that Star and Stripes and her sister needed his help. It was mind-boggling, to say the least. But he didn't get much time to process it, because suddenly Kyaku ran into his office excitedly. "Kyaku, you're supposed to knock." Izuku half-heartedly scolded her, mostly because he was just out of energy. "Daddy, I know what I want to work towards," Kyaku said, a rush of pure excitement as she ran up to him and held up her arms. "Oh?" Izuku lifted her up on his lap, curious about what this was about. "I want to be your assistant," Kyaku told him with a sparkle in her eye that Izuku rarely saw. "I want to learn how to do all that paperwork stuff, so you don't have to work as hard. And I can spend more time with you." Izuku felt his heart clench, and his face scrunched up. "Daddy, you're making the scrunchy face again," Kyaku gasped. "That means you're happy, right?" "Yes, sweetie. I'm very happy," Izuku said, trying to recover from the shot of wholesomeness he just got, after getting over how cute she was, and happy that made him. He gave her a pat on the head. "All right, Kyaku, you want to help me with paperwork. It's gonna take a lot of learning, and it's not very interesting work. I don't mind. I'll be the best assistant in the whole world," Kyaku swore, in a fashion that Izuku found absolutely adorable. "Okay, well then, why don't you go play for now? And tomorrow I'll have a lesson planned for you, okay?" Izuku told her. Kyaku frowned. "We can't do it right now? If you rush things, then there's a good chance you may not do it right. You have to take your time, and be patient," Izuku told her, before setting her down. "Don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to learn, okay?" "Okay." Kyaku nodded. "Good. Now go play. I'm sure Iri and would love to spend some time with you today," Izuku told her. "All right, Daddy. I love you," Kyaku said. Izuku smiled at her. "I love you too." Alright, so firstly, the Kyaku arc is officially done. Yay. Secondly, we're gonna get into the part of the story where Izuku starts employing more and more people. Alright, now let's talk about the big thing. Alice. So yeah, her quirk is pretty busted. It has a lot of limitations and weaknesses, but if used correctly it can do some stupid stuff. Now I could write 4 more pages explaining how her quirk works in excruciating detail. But instead, I think it'll be better to just wait for you guys to ask the questions, and then answer them at the beginning of the next chapter. So, if you have any questions about how her quirk works, or if you want to leave your thoughts, please put them in the reviews and have a nice day. Chapter 90, I am the bone of my sword. Alright, so let's answer some questions. Firstly, someone asked how long does the writing have to last for Alice's quirk to work? Okay. So if what Alice wrote was destroyed before it could take effect, or while it's taking effect, her quirk will be neutralized. Second question, does it matter what she uses to write? No. It does not matter what she uses to write, or what she writes on. The only thing that matters is that she can understand what she's writing, meaning it does have to legible. She also does have to write it herself, meaning she can't use something like letter blocks or fridge magnets. Also, someone called Alice's quirk minor fate manipulation. And I wouldn't say that's accurate. Fate manipulation involves more than just controlling people's actions, it's also about controlling probability and some other factors. For example, if Alice could do something like write 3 o'clock, a pen will fall off a desk. That would be minor fate manipulation. However, Alice can't control intimate objects. I'd say what she does is less minor fate manipulation and more mental manipulation on a mass scale, which can seem like fate manipulation if done right. Although this all depends on strictly you define fate manipulation. Technically speaking, if you kill someone you could call that fate manipulation, as you are deciding their fate, so I guess if you really wanted to call this a form of fate manipulation, then you wouldn't technically be wrong. Speaking of fate, time to get onto the chapter. I'd like to apply for the bodyguard position. Izuku was utterly flabbergasted. He was just laying down on his bed, and his phone rang. And someone called him and asked to apply for a job. Now, really that shouldn't be surprising, because that's really how it's supposed to go. He was only taken off guard because of the way the last bodyguard applied for the position. "Oh, I suppose I could set up an interview. And I'll have to test your abilities," Izuku responded. "Give me your name and number. I'll do a background check and I'll call you to tell you the date of the interview." "Right. My name is Saibura," the woman on the phone explained. "And my number is—" "Wait a minute," Izuku blurted out in shock. "As in, that Saibura? As in the former pro hero, Saber?" "Yes," the woman said reluctantly. "The very same. Well, I suppose testing your abilities is unnecessary then," Izuku said in utter disbelief. "No, it's been a while since I was active. It would be good to make sure my abilities are still up to par," Sai insisted, her voice firm and unwavering. "Well, if you insist," Izuku responded. "I suppose the background check won't take as long then. Your history is well documented. I'm still going to do some research, but everything should be fine. You can come around in a couple of days, and I'll have everything set up for you by then." "I see. Thank you," Sai said. A few days later, Sai came into Izuku's office for Izuku's first ever interview. "Welcome, please make yourself comfortable," Izuku said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. "Thank you." Sai nodded respectfully, sitting down. Sai was relatively young for being a retired pro hero, being only 33 and looking like she was 20. She had long blonde hair that was tied in a bun. Deep blue eyes, and unblemished skin, would make you think she'd never had seen battle before, if not for her calloused hands. She was wearing a black suit and a red tie. Not something you would normally see a woman in, but it fit the serious way she carried herself. "Now, firstly, why do you want to work here?" Izuku asked. He'd taken yesterday to compose himself, making sure he could be completely serious and not fanboy in the face of the former pro hero. "As you know, I was a former pro hero. I quit for personal reasons. However, I've spent most of my life training to be a hero, and as such my skill set is limited," Sai admitted. "This seems to just be the best use of my talents." "I see. Thank you. I consider that high praise," Izuku said, forcing down a bit of giddiness. "Alright, next, how do you feel about OPCs?" "I don't have feelings one way or the other. Human beings are human beings, and should be treated as such," Sai stated simply. "Perfect answer," Izuku thought, smiling a bit. "Alright, well, given how much I know about you, this interview doesn't really need to go on much longer. I suppose we should move on to the test portion of the interview." "I see. Well then, let's not waste time," Sai said, standing up. "Please lead me to my test." The test was taking place in the training room, and as they entered the room, they found Kiba, Netsu, and Yami waiting for them. "So this is the former pro hero?" Kiba looked over her with her arms crossed, looking skeptical. "I'll admit she does look quite good in that suit. But I'm eager to see if she can meet our expectations. I can't wait to see her fight. This is gonna be so cool." Netsu was far more openly excited about all this, as opposed to his other two siblings. Yami didn't seem to care much. "I hope that my performance will be satisfactory," Sai said, giving them a small, but genuine smile, and giving them a polite bow. "I will do my best." "I'd hope so. Otherwise, why would we consider hiring you?" Kiba asked. "I expect you to give 110%. "Understood," Sai said. "Well, she's pretty good with kids. So that's a relief. Izuku thought. Okay. Well then. Yami. If you would. Yami nodded, and turned around, before vomiting a large amount of black goop. The black goop then took form, in the shape of a Goliath. Oh. So that's how those are made, Sai said, trying and mostly succeeding in not looking disgusted. Well, your first test will be to subdue the Goliath, without killing it, Izuku told her. I see. That makes sense. Sai said as she got ready to start, staying on the other side of the room. Fortunately, I am experienced in that department. Very well. Begin. Izuku ordered. Immediately, the Goliath started charging towards her, its huge figure looming over the much smaller woman it was against. But she stood calmly, not moving an inch, or showing a hint of fear. As the space behind her rippled like water. Boom. Then, suddenly, a sword shot out of the ripple, hit the Goliath in the face, and exploded. The Goliath roared in pain, as it was injured and blinded by the explosion, and it tilted to the side, running past Sai, and into a wall behind her, stunning it even more. After that, more ripples appeared around the Goliath's legs, and more swords shot out of them, not exploding this time, but slashing its legs, and causing it to fall on its side. Unable to get up. I believe my opponent is no longer capable of continuing, Sai noted, still not taking her eyes off Goliath. Shall we move on? Whoa. So many swords. Where did they come from? Netsu asked, turning to Izuku for an explanation. This is Saber's quirk. Infinite blade works. Izuku gladly explained. Buru has access to her own personal, pocket dimension, in which exist infinite copies of every sword she has ever seen. She can create portals to this dimension, and pull those swords out of it. Or just shoot them out at high speeds like you saw her do here. That is a spectacular quirk. With an even more spectacular name. Kiba commented, seemingly pleased by her performance. Unlimited blade works. How many portals can she open, at once? Netsu asked, his flames burning brighter than normal. About 50, Sai explained. Although the more I open, the faster I drain myself. Why did one of them explode? Yami asked. Ah. Well, to put it simply, I can recreate anything I considered a sword. Sai explained. With all the effects and aspects of the original. As such, I have been shown a variety of special swords made solely for the purpose of strengthening my quirk. This includes swords designed specifically to explode upon impact. Of course, I have different types of explosive swords with different levels of power. Right. I've only ever witnessed your full power once. And it was awe-inspiring. Izuku recalled, smiling fondly. For some reason, after saying that, Sai's expression dipped a little bit, before returning to her normal, neutral one. My maximum yield is a bit damaging to be shown off in a place as small and confined as this one. So unfortunately, children, you'll have to wait to see my full capabilities. That is assuming I pass these next tests. I doubt you'll come close to failing, Izuku said. We'll start the next test, but could you dispose of the Goliath first? Of course, Sai said, as a portal opened, and shot a sword, at lightning speed, right into the Goliath's neck, killing it. After it faded away, Izuku turned to Yami. You can begin. Yami nodded and started vomiting out more goop. This time a lot more. The goop then turned into a small army of Birangels, that surrounded Sai entirely. Alright, the same rules apply as the last test, Izuku instructed. One question, Sai said before the test began. Are these things susceptible to poisons and toxins? The Grimm are meant to replicate living organisms. Albeit but stronger than your typical person or animal. So yes, but they'd have to be pretty powerful. Izuku explained. I see, Sai responded. That was all. I am ready to begin. Okay. Start the test. Izuku said. Yami nodded, and a moment later, the Birangels all charged at her. Of course, they didn't get very far, as portals opened up behind them. and a ton of short swords shot into their backs with extreme force, knocking them all the ground in an instant, leaving them at her feet. The Birangels tried to get up, but they struggled for a bit, before stopping completely, lying helpless on the floor. Ah, so she had poison blades as well. Kiba deduced, smirking with satisfaction. Very nice. She's taking them all out without even moving. That's so cool. Netsu said. Well, we've seen your capabilities against both tough single opponents, and strong groups of opponents. Now we just need to see if you can take on something truly fearsome, which I know you can, but I'm making sure. Izuku explained, trying not to make a fool of himself. Anyway, the final test has already been set up, and it starts now. And sorry for what's about to happen. Sai's eyes widened as she quickly put together what was happening, and she immediately reacted. She pulled a sword out of a portal, and quickly turned and slashed behind her. She slashed something, and saw something. She assumed it was a grim, oozed darkness from the wound for a second before it closed up. Sai then heard the creature jump back, and created more portals behind it, and shot swords out at where she assumed it was. However, the swords flew right past where she thought it was, as the grim head ducked down, with the swords flying overhead, right at Sai. Sai makes a portal in front of her, and shoots a sword out of it, deflecting the sword that was coming at her. And yet, a second later, something hit her, pushing her back and holding her against the wall. AGH. Sai cried out, as she felt a hand holding her throat, and choking her. She shot another sword from below, cutting off the invisible extended arm, and freeing her. It seems this one will be a lot more trouble, Sai thought. Taking things up a notch, Sai opened a ton of portals, on both sides of the room, and started shooting out swords pretty much everywhere. Suddenly, the hound became visible, ripped off its own head, and threw it at Sai. The swords hit the hound's body, sinking into his flesh, but the head managed to slip through one of the openings between the swords. Its head flew at Sai, teeth bared at the former hero. Sai jumped back, avoiding the head, as it landed on the ground. Then she watched in shock, as the creature began to regenerate its body. I see. So that was the point of this exercise. Sai thought as she opened a large number of portals around the still regenerating hound. Kaboom! The swords all hit the hound, creating a huge explosion, engulfing the hound completely. Izuku and the children shielded their faces and eyes from the light and the wind that came from the blast. When the explosion died down, and the smoke cleared, all that could be seen was black smoke if now dead hound, dissipating into the air. Izuku gave melancholy smile. You killed it. You never said that the rules of the previous test applied to this one. And once more, this opponent was one that both constantly adapted, and regenerated. Sai explained calmly. It was never an opponent that one could realistically capture or non-lethally incapacitate. Or at the least most opponents would lack the means to do so. Therefore the purpose of this test was to see if I was willing to know when taking a life is necessary to protect the children. Izuku nodded, and his smile vanished. I despise the thought of killing. And if it was up to me, I would never, ever take a life. But, as a father and caretaker, my children must always come first. While I would never go to it as a first resort, I have to acknowledge that there are some opponents that are simply unable to be contained or captured. Therefore, I need the people charged with protecting this place to be able to do the same. Sai closed her eyes and considered her next words. I have taken the lives of villains before. It is a very heavy decision to make, and should not be made for a shallow cause. However, protecting children, that is a cause worthy of taking a life. I see. Then there is no need to test you any further, Izuku said. You're hired. Sai smiled and pulled out a sword. A golden blade, with a bright blue hilt. Then I swear to you, upon my blade, I will protect you and these children. No matter the cost. Yes, you will, do quite nicely. Kiba smiled. I am happy to welcome you as part of our army. Handle our forces with care, and protect your queen and her siblings with pride. Sai gave a brief chuckle. Of course, my lady. Can I keep one of the swords? Netsu asked. Unfortunately, the swords will not remain here for much longer, Sai explained. A few moments after she said that, the swords she had summoned disappeared in a bright blue light. Whoa? What happened to them? Netsu asked, running over to where the swords once were. The swords I make are not of this world. They belong to the world inside my imagination. A world of infinite swords. When I force them through the portal here, I'm forcing something that should not exist into existence. Sai explained. As such, they can only be here for a certain amount of time, before they fade back into their own reality. The same goes for anything that I would drag into that world, aside from swords, that is. Interesting. Well, you can tell me about the details of your quirk in our wrap-up discussion. Izuku said. Well, talk about pay, accommodations, healthcare, terms. All that. Very well, let's take this back to your office, sir, Sai said, as she and Izuku departed. A couple hours later, the two had worked everything out, and contracts had been signed, cementing Sai as the bodyguard for the Midoriya Foundation. All right. So, do you have any last questions or concerns? Izuku asked her before the meeting ended. Sai paused for a moment, before speaking. You haven't asked about why I quit. I didn't feel a need. Izuku dismissed her concern, but that didn't seem to sit right with her. The HPSC has gone to lengths to make sure I would have difficulties finding work elsewhere. Sai continued. To be honest, I applied here not just because it seemed like a noble cause, but also because I was hoping you'd be kind enough to overlook that. It's not hard to tell that a lot of the discouraging things the HPSC has said about you are exaggerated, Izuku explained. I'm sure you had your reasons for quitting. And I won't ask you if it makes you uncomfortable. Although, admittedly, I have put together my own theory with the information I have available to me. My apologies if that seems a bit invasive. Sai sighed. No. It's perfectly reasonable to be curious and come to your own conclusions. Although, I would like to hear about your theory. There was a minute of silence, as Izuku took a second to think about what he was going to say. Well, I know you were taken in by the HPSC at a young age and spent most of your life training to be a hero. Izuku started. Eventually you gained your hero license and became the leader of a team of heroes. Consisting of yourself, Saber, and your teammates, Lancer, Berserker, Caster, Assassin, and Archer. You performed very well. With all of you being extremely powerful heroes in your own right, and as a team you were even more effective. Then, all of a sudden, Lancer and Berserker were announced to be dead, Caster was revealed to be a villain, and Archer and Assassin disappeared off the face of the earth. And lastly, you quit being a pro hero. Sai remained quiet, listening intently to Izuku's words. My theory is as such. Caster had been secretly doing something, I don't know what, that she was afraid of you all finding out about. Izuku continued. Berserker's quirk was notoriously hard to control, and if something set him off emotionally while it was active, then it could be disastrous. I'm guessing Caster sabotaged you all, making Berserker go out of control, which was the reason for Lancer's death. You and Berserker were known to be good friends, but considering his power, and how much damage he could do, you would have no choice but to put him down, while the other two took care of Caster. Once again, Sai remained silent, not confirming or denying anything yet. I have no idea what became of Assassin and Archer. I presume they're still alive, and were just heavily discouraged, leaving without going through the formalities you did. Izuku said. Now as for you, I have little doubt that the events of this tragedy had shaken you a bit. But even then, looking at your behavior then, and even now, I doubt that it'd have been enough to get you to quit outright. Something was said or revealed, or done, by someone, that either heavily damaged, or destroyed your faith in heroes outright. That's the only thing I could think of, as to why someone who spent their entire life in the pursuit of one goal would suddenly quit. Once Izuku finished giving out his theory, there was a long, tense silence, with Sai looking down the entire time. Eventually, she pulled up her head, a serious look in her eye. It almost alarming how much of that you managed to put together. I suppose, in that case, I'll fill in the blanks. As it turns out, Castor was working with someone known as All for One. Izuku's eyes widened. All for One? Sai's eyes widened as well, seemingly shocked that Izuku knew about the mysterious villain. However, her expression returned to her serious one, and she continued the story. Yes. For whatever reason, Castor was working for that villain, and when we discovered this and tried to apprehend her, Berserker suddenly attacked us and killed Lancer with a surprise attack. He didn't seem to be himself. I don't know what Castor did, or how she did it, but somehow she was controlling Berserker, forcing him to fight us. He was too strong. Even stronger than normal. And I killed him. Now it was Izuku who stayed silent, giving nothing more than a sympathetic look, not wanting to show any disrespect towards this woman's loss. As you said, Archer and Assassin took down Castor, although she was significantly stronger than normal, and she was using her quick in ways we've never seen before. Sai continued. And then after that, after everything was finished, I gave my briefing to the HPSC and they didn't treat Berserker's death with the respect it deserved. Ah, so that's what did it, Izuku thought. Some more things were said, and in the end, I decided I couldn't continue working for them anymore, Sai said, doing a very good job at restraining the lingering anger she felt just remembering this occurrence. And I quit. I see. Izuku gave her a saddened look. I'm sorry you had to go through all that. Berserker was a hero worthy of respect. I remember his contribution to ending the Insatiate. It's a shame the HPSC couldn't do the same. Sai gave a sad smile, recalling the event Izuku spoke of. Yes. A shame. Another moment passed, before Sai's expression became deadly serious, when I mentioned All for One. You reacted like you knew that name. Izuku's eyes went wide again, as he realized he'd given himself away. Ah. Yeah. I suppose I did. And I'm guessing the HPSC didn't tell you a lot about him. They denied he existed, Sai explained sternly. No matter how much I asked, and insisted to know the truth, that denied me at every step. It was part of the reason I quit. Izuku bit the side of his cheek, hesitating a bit. And I'm guessing you want me to tell you about him. Given all I've been through because of him, I think I deserve to know, Sai said. Izuku sighed. Well, I can't disagree. But I need you to keep what I tell you to yourself at all cost. It's heavily classified information, and the only reason I know all this is because of a powerful friend of mine who's not too great at keeping secrets. It's pretty much a state secret. Well, no, it makes a bit more sense as to why they were so adamant on keeping me in the dark, Sai said with notable disdain. I swear I will keep my lips sealed. Very well. Izuku got ready to start explaining. To put it simply, All for One is the oldest and most dangerous villains to ever have existed. Dating back to when quirks first began to emerge. His quirk, All for One, allows him to steal the quirks of others, and use them for himself. Or even transfer them to other people. Sai's eyes widened. Wait. Then that means Castor must have been given quirks by All for One, Izuku told her. My guess is that she gained these quirks in exchange for favors. He could practically hear Sai's fist clenching, as rage bubbled up to the surface. Currently, we think he's dead, Izuku said. All Might battled the villain, and smashed his face in, but the body was never found. And given that he's had a couple hundred years to gather quirks, it's entirely possible that he could still be alive, Sai concluded, looking mighty upset, to say the least. Right. Izuku nodded. But no one's heard anything from him since his supposed death. So either he is truly dead, or he's biding his time. Izuku knew that wouldn't be a satisfying answer. Heck, it was probably the least satisfying answer. But it was the truth, and she deserved the truth. So he's the one responsible for all this. He certainly sounds like a monster. Sai said, once again trying to contain her anger, but only barely doing so. Is it truly fine to leave his fate uncertain? Shouldn't they be doing everything in their power to make sure he's truly dead? And if not, make sure he actually dies? Probably, but up until now, All Might was certain he killed him, Izuku responded. And the HPSC is content to assume he's dead. They likely won't make a move unless they see something pointing towards him being alive. And even then, Sai let out a very frustrated sigh. Typical. Well, if he is alive, then he's bound to show up eventually. And when that happens, All Might will take care of him. That I can assure you. Izuku told her. From what you've told me, this man appears to not fear death via aging. If that's the case, then All Might may not be around to fight him. Sai pointed out firmly. Izuku nodded. We are well aware of that. However, there is a plan in place in the event that transpires. Right now, there is a hero, being trained at UA who is destined to surpass All Might. If All Might can't finish him off, she will. That a lofty expectation. How are you so sure of this? Sai asked, with suspicion. Well, that secret is something I can't disclose to you. My apologies, Izuku told her. Unfortunately, that secret is not only not mine to tell, but it's also much more important to keep hidden than the existence of All for One. I'm really sorry, but I'll just need you to trust me. I see, Sai responded. Thank you. For telling me what you could. And for telling me what you couldn't. I admire your honesty. It confirms that working for you was the right choice. It's nothing to admire. You deserved some closure. Izuku told her. Now, then I'll give you till next month to gather all your stuff, and bring it here. You can start working here with the other guard at the same time. Other guard? Oh. Izuku's eyes went wide as he realized he forgot something important. I didn't tell you about her. I'm so sorry, it must have slipped my mind. It's fine, Sai reassured him. Just tell me what she's like. Well. Izuku tried to find the best way to word it. She's very unique. Okay, and with that, we have our next employee. And it's a Fate reference. Specifically, 3 Fate references packed into one. Her appearance and personality resemble Artoria, and her quirk is a mix of Shiro's Unlimited Blade Works, and Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon.